Alrighty, folks. We are here. I would say I'm feeling kind of 80% this morning, so I hope you guys don't mind. Please don't make me sit through Owen's interview, please. What's Owen's interview? What's Owen's interview? What do you mean? Dave Ramsey says the government needs to solve the housing credit tax crisis by giving tax breaks to the wealthy. Calls out people for owning multiple houses for rentals. 30 seconds later, mentions that he also have 15 to 20 houses he rents. 15 to 20 more, but no more. I got mine. The problem with housing is people, corporations buying up homes to rent them out or Airbnb. Also, Dave, I own 15 rental houses. He finally started talking about this once he learned China was getting involved. Yeah, I mean, the capitalists want to maintain their position. Welcome in, chat, to the Central Committee stream. This is your host, Mike from PA. This is our favorite China Glaze stream. No, I'm all... Disney invests $1 billion in Sora AI. I saw a TikTok of somebody giving props to an AI actor, and they looked really fucking... How to understand China's system. Wow, this is a long video. Woo! I think one of the issues with China in general is that for so long, you know, China was a poorer country, and so the details of how things actually work wasn't really important. It was really just Americans saying, "Oh, that country kind of sucks. I guess it sucks because of whatever my government says." Right? Like, you don't have to be a genius to just kind of go, "Well, that country's not that good compared to mine, so therefore if my country says it's bad, I guess it's bad." You know what I mean? Like that was the history. And now people are kind of like, wait a minute, China's kind of good actually. And they're re-examining the stuff they were taught. And when you re-examine the things that you were taught, you realize actually everything is bullshit. This has nothing to do with reality. What's going on here? Why am I being propagandized to? Why are they so like China is nothing like it was described in the propaganda of Western countries and in the media. Times Person of the Year. 2025 was the year when artificial intelligence full potential roared into view. Really? Can someone explain to me the full potential of AI? I please. I think that the gap on perceptions in China are going to be basically generational. If you're an old person and you grew up during the Cold War and you were, you know, and you own your own home and you know, you had children and your life kind of, you know, you graduated college without a lot of debt and now you're on Social Security and Medicare, you're probably going to think America's pretty great. You know, you made $1 million because you paid off your mortgage and now you have a comfortable retirement in Florida. It's probably pretty hard to convince that person that capitalism sucks if their life worked out so well. But if you are anybody under the age of 45, you're like, nah, this system is fucking garbage. Not only is it garbage, it didn't react to calls for reform. I highly recommend watching FD Signifier's newest video. Is it 1 million years long?
Do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Too many.
Charlie Kirk and the conservative death cult. Okay, we may have to actually watch this entire thing because this is the most entertaining topic of all time.
Okay, now 5 is a lot, right? I'm gonna give you some credit. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
I think ultimately the one thing I would say about Charlie Kirk is nobody cares about Charlie Kirk. No one's ever going to remember Charlie Kirk. I want you to understand that. Like, even if they build 1 million foundations and they slap his name onto it, in 10 or 20 years, people are not going to, they're going to look back on the Charlie Kirk Foundation is going to be an embarrassment. Or it's only going to be something that people, you know, they are going to, the name's going to be obscure. And when people look into it, they're going to be like, ew, what? He said what? He believed what? Ew. It's going to be like having the John C. Calhoun fucking foundation or something. Nobody's going to want to be associated with that. The other thing to keep in mind is that conservatism is never correct. I want you to understand that. In the history of society, conservatism has never been correct. We never look back and go, you know, in Rome, the oligarchic groups of Cato, if only they had more slaves, that would have saved the empire or the republic. If only they had more slave labor for the ultra rich in Rome. That would have saved the Republic. You know, guys, Herbert Hoover, the way that he didn't do anything while the economy crashed for 4 years, that was the ticket. It's just conservatism from ancient times till now is obviously wrong because humanity has not perfected society. And we have now gotten insights in philosophy and psychology about the inherent equalness of human beings. All of us, our experiences, our relationships, we have value, equal value. There isn't an elect, be it from genetics or from some divine writ. None of us are set above the others in any kind of enduring way. It's all based on the relations, social relations that we engineered. So the question is, how could we change those mechanisms to serve us, humanity? That is the only question. What change should be made? Not that change should be made, but what change and when, in what sequence? And fundamentally, that means conservatism is wrong. It is wrong in a truly deep and fundamental way. Human beings are not living in their highest way. They are not ordered in the most perfect mechanisms. They are not respected and rights enthusiastically celebrated for every breathing human being on this planet. We are far from perfected. And so ultimately, conservatism is a dead fucking end. Before we even get into the particularities of what Charlie Kirk said. And I think that is fundamentally what's so interesting. Of all the people to be killed, Charlie Kirk was killed. Did you see Sam Cedar on IVE had it? Oh, no, I haven't. But I was going to watch that yesterday. You want to watch it now? Fuck it. Let's watch it now. Let's watch some of it until I get bored, and then we can move on. I think that's a really good way of doing things. Sam Cedar on I've Had It podcast. I'm a fan. The problem is it's like, I've been the fuck you lefty for years, and a lot of people like hated me for that. You know what I mean? And now everybody's copying it, and it's like, maybe you should, you should give the original some fucking some credit.
So are we supposed to start?
Oh, the Gramscian fight at late capitalism. Have you noticed how Fuentes gets asked if his ambitions are political? Wonder why they don't ask Hassan the same, even if given he is even better positioned than Nick. I wish Hassan would run. I wish I could get Hassan or Caroline to run. I really do. I really do. If I lived in LA for 5 years, that I would do it. But I mean, like, honestly, I haven't. I'm not ready, so I can't. And I know exactly what it takes. He says he is never running for office. Such a waste. Such a bummer. You're a guy who personally worked in political campaigns. Asking a normal human to do that is like telling them to drink battery acid. Bad take. No, it's not. These are the perfect people to run. They're not normal. That's the whole point. They don't have a real job. They have the easiest job in the world. And their job also doubles as fundraising and propaganda. They could literally just do their regular streams, fundraise for their campaign. They could have content from it. It would be great. It would be dual use. It wouldn't have to do phone time. They could just do their streams. And people would be talking about what they said on their stream. And their stream would have so many viewers, the media would fucking cotton to whatever they're saying. You guys don't know what you're talking about. This is a new innovation that hasn't been done yet. If a successful political streamer like Hassan ran for office, it would completely reset everything. And it would work completely. Trump did it from tweeting. Imagine doing it on live. Now, obviously, Hassan would have to tighten up and not say dumb shit. But it's harder to lie about a guy if you could just tune into his stream, and it would work because politically, what are political campaigns really? They are efforts to make people like you so they vote for you. What better way to make people like you and vote for you than an authentic stream that appeals to the mass? Like, it is by far and away the tactic. Why do you think it's working in Mexico? Why do you think Marina is doing so well? Because they figured it out first. For some reason, Americans are just fucking racist and they can't see that the Mexicans figured it out first. There's some sort of like chauvinism on the American left about Mexico that blows my fucking mind and I can't get over it. I mean, Americans are really fucking chauvinistic, like especially American leftists. It actually is one of the things I hate the most about, like, people talk about cancel culture, and yes, it is annoying and people try to cancel me, and it is annoying that people try to, attack my reputation over dumb bullshit that I don't agree with. That is annoying. I'm not saying it's not. But by far and away, the most annoying thing about Americans is they're chauvinistic and arrogant, and they never learn from other countries. And it is fucking annoying as fuck. Anyway, this is my personal take. I mean, people may ultimately, if people don't want to do it, then they're not going to do it. I'm just saying if they did, it would work. If you think they're famous now, you think Hassan's famous now, you're talking about strategy. I'm talking about how most people don't want to voluntarily ruin their lives. And there in no way would Hassan's life change at all. Literally. He's already treated like a presidential candidate. Everything he does is hyper fucking examined and criticized like he's a politician. He already lives the politician lifestyle where it's like, oh, you bought a car. Is that's not very socialistic of you. And it's like, that only happens to politicians. No one else gives a fuck. Like, again, you're right. For a regular person, it's fucking taxing. I'm not saying it's not, but for somebody like Hassan, he already lives the politician lifestyle. Who gives a fuck? And he doesn't realize the power that he holds because, and I think, you know, if I have one criticism of Hassan, it's that he doesn't wield the power that he has. He doesn't wield the power that he has at anywhere near the level that he should. Do you think West Hollywood is left enough to elect Hassan? Yes, of course. And he would definitely have a battle. There's no doubt. Actually, I think the district that's right next to, I might actually move to this district. Which district is it? I don't remember. Sarah Jacobs is cool. Which district am I thinking of? There's one district that I think would be the ideal district to run in. Is it the Glendale one? Yes. This is definitely on my, this is on the list, but I don't think it's the one I was thinking of. Here it is. No, never mind. That's San Jose. I can't find it. I mean, they're remaking the district, so I have to relook at this. This isn't the one I was thinking of. Although you could live in Calabasas, which isn't that bad. Is it Laura? Is this the one I was thinking of? I think this is the one I was thinking of. This is the one. I think it's Laura Friedman. This is the one I think they should run against. I think she sucks. Or maybe it's not her. No, it's her. It's her. Schiff's likely House successor vows to continue his pro-Israel legacy from a progressive purge. This is the one I think we should go after. This would be fun. But I guess we like Brad Lander now, so I mean, I have to say the New York City DSA is tailing Zoran, and it sucks. Basically, people have convinced themselves that they have to do whatever Zoran's thinks is in his personal best interest in the moment, and that's gonna help. Totally wrong. And in fact, it sucks. Brad Lander sucks shit, and there's really no excuse. There's really no excuse for supporting Brad Lander. Brad Lander is dog shit. He's not charismatic. He's not a good candidate. The only reason people even like him is because he co-endorsed a guy who was already beating him in the polls, and he's a Zionist. Like, the Brad Lander cope is fucking pathetic. And this is why I'm not Groundwork or I'm not Socialist Majority. I'm more Bread and Roses coded, because those guys are just, they have machine politician brain, and they just are kind of Democrats. I mean, like, I don't know what else to say. I think Hassan thinks his kind of rough and Muslim background is too much of a hurdle for office. Nobody fucking cares. He's wrong. Didn't he put his body in line to protect immigrants? I don't care what you do if you support Israel. There's no redemption if you support Israel. If you identify as Bread and Roses isn't even Marxist, I don't actually have any caucus. I don't agree with any of the caucus. If I'm being completely honest, I don't like any of them. I agree with bits and pieces of each, what their various caucuses say. I don't really consider myself a member of any caucus, which is a problem. I need to kind of like find my seat. I'm probably closer to like some of the more what are called centrist Marxist caucuses, so not the right-wing DSA caucuses. But I'm also not like a Maoist. I'm not an ultra. So I might be Red Star coded. Yeah, Red Star, Bread and Roses, somewhere in there probably. I don't like Mug that much because I like a lot of what Mug says. I do. It's just it doesn't hit either. Again, there's some, it's all tactical shit that I disagree with. It doesn't really matter that much. Being not involved in caucuses is the quickest way to irrelevancy in the national DSA, unfortunately. Not correct. When you have your own platform like I do, I could do what I want. I could be an independent if I wanted. Yeah, I'm not talking like you, probably true. Me, maybe not. Prove it, Keck W. I mean, true. I don't know. I need to get more involved. Like right now, I enjoy my position of just being a booster and not involving myself because I'm just gonna, you know, it's hard for me not to be harsh and critical whenever I look at people. So I'm trying to work on myself before I plunge back in. I'm good at analyzing politics, but I'm not good at politics in the sense of office politics. I'm not good at relational aggression. I'm not good at being in the group chats and backbiting and things like that. I'm not, that's not where my skill set is. That's why I'd rather attach myself to somebody who has good skill sets in that area so that I can, and they just trust my tactical decision making. I'd rather be the general instead of the fucking president. You know, like I want to tell the soldiers where to march. I don't want to be standing in front of a fucking podium in a suit. Should I join DSA? Yes. You should join DSA just so you meet some other socialists nearby you that have similar cultural like backgrounds and you can be like, oh, okay, this is cool. All right, chat, let's watch Sam Cedar on the I've Had It podcast. This will be a nice morning because I need it.
The podcast.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Patriots, gay triots, they triots, black triots, and brown triots, and all the people that are mean to those people can do what, Pumps? Fuck off! There she is, crowing like an eagle for America. You guys, in our journey from establishment
Brown
Democrats
that's
to
crazy.
woke AF,
Only a white
progressive
woman from Oklahoma
AF,
could
we
come
are
up with
sitting
that.
with our master now. Sam Cedar, and those of you die-hard anti-establishment Democrats, I hope that you're proud of us that we are sitting with Sam now. Sam, how are you?
I'm proud of myself for sitting with you guys. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's really been an interesting. I've always been a Democrat, but it's really been an interesting journey for me as I've seen establishment Democrats like set us up to a position to lose because I hate losing and I really love beating Republicans.
Yeah.
And we lost to a fucking moron twice. And then you look into that and you realize what the problem is. And then you start realizing a bunch of the corporate media that you've believed and that you have held dear was all bullshit.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a mouthful. Yeah, I mean, I think I've been doing this now for over 20 years.
You're an antique.
I am very old, and I feel older than that. But and when I started off, it was in the aughts, and it was in the run up to the Bush. The George W. Bush re-election in 2004. Mm-hmm. And to watch Democrats always operate from a defensive crouch was extremely frustrating at that time. And there was
when John Kerry got swift voted.
Yeah, when John Kerry got swift voted. But when I think of that election, I also think of John Kerry windsurfing off the coast of Nantucket in August, and I'm thinking, this is. I mean, I had left show business because I had this opportunity to do. Talk radio, and I thought, like, this is, arguably the most important election of my lifetime. And I thought, like, he could have just waited 3 or 4 months. I mean, granted, he'd have to maybe go to Bermuda or something like that to do his windsurfing. But there's a lack of urgency, I think, by Democrats. And
there's a lack of urgency because there's a contradiction between what they say they represent and what the donors allow them to do. So their main effort is to diffuse the energy that's rising by being shit. You understand that, right? Like, part of the way that you keep pressure from building is you make it seem like nothing is happening. The Democratic Party is a steel tank, and you are a fire roaring underneath it. And for a long time, it'll feel like nothing is happening as the pressure inside the tank builds. And builds and builds and builds. And what we have to do is keep throwing logs onto the fire until it explodes. And part of the strategy is it's like, what? I'm going to dump my energy into Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer? That's exactly why they are the leadership. because of that exact energy. It's like, ew, you want to support them? I don't think so. And you're totally right. They are dog shit. What would it take for someone like the I've Had It ladies or Sam and Emma to start publicly saying it's time to abandon the Democratic Party or I'm beyond the Democratic Party? Sam is going to always be a late joiner in that project. And if you want to know, I'll tell you exactly what it would take because I know how these people think. Sam Seder would switch to a third party if a major political figure aligned with us abandoned the Democratic Party and started their own party. And then it seemed like it had millions of people changing parties. And the polls showed that person and that party might have a chance of winning. Then Sam would switch. Sam will not lead the charge. He will join it if it seems like it will succeed, but he will not join it. In fact, I think he would probably be, if Bernie Sanders launched a new party with AOC, I think he would join it. If you know, someone else did, he would be probably negative, neutral on it until it looked like it was working. I'm just telling you the reality of how it is. I'm just telling you the reality of how it is. Until there was like evidence that it was working and the Democratic Party was collapsing and this new party was surging to a place where it might achieve victory. And like, that is the way it is. And I know that. That's most people. Most people are Democrats not because they like the Democratic Party politicians. They're Democrats because the Democrats have a chance of winning. And you align yourself with what you think is plausible. And I'm not saying that Sam Seder is an opportunist. I think Sam Seder is just a tactical person. He thinks we're on a battlefield and we need to, you know, it is in Sam Seder's mind, it's World War I. And it's about getting into that next trench. I want to maneuver around the battle line. I want to get us into fucking fighter jets and cruise missiles. I want us to be streaking at hypersonic speed over top these trenches. And so, you know, Sam Seder's going to say we shouldn't abandon the trench because we'll get machine gunned down. That's what he believes. But if he saw a breakthrough happening, he would rush into it with everybody. Like if he saw us getting around and making some sort of gains in a way he didn't expect, he would join us. So that's not me calling him an opportunist. It's just he tactically calculates something different than I do. I think we're already losing the war. I think we're already losing the trench warfare. If we continue to do trench warfare, I think we're fucked. So I don't see the point. I think we need to do something bold. I think we need to do something different. There isn't one politician that I wouldn't replace. There's nobody that we have on our side that's irreplaceable. And that gives us tremendous freedom.
I think a lack of understanding, particularly with a specific sort of, I want to say a generation, but it's not just a function of age. It's a function of, I think, when they learned politics. You know, like for me, every 90% of the music I listened to was basically from like an 8-year period from when I was like, high school into like a couple years out of college. That's basically where I'm stuck on. And I feel like there were a lot of politicians who were stuck on a certain era and were operating under that understanding of politics. And the Republican Party is not who the Republican Party was, 30 or 40 years ago. And so I think we are stuck with Democrats who are largely in the leadership, who don't understand the moment that they're in and are just not up to the moment that they're in. And I think like you can lose well. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, in the aughts, we were dealing in the wake of 9/11. There was reason why, people were cowed and people were nervous and people were largely in shock, I think. But Democrats didn't even know how to lose well in a way that made it clear, like, who's responsible for what policies, and we're willing to fight for these other policies, even if we don't have the strength to win now. So it's frustrating, and welcome to the party. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I remember I was raised Republican, evangelical Christian, registered as Republican, apathetic Republican is what I would say. But what I remember about the John Kerry thing, which when you were talking about, that's when you kind of entered this realm. I remember what a big mess they made of his wife being rich. And now I look at it and I think his cabinet is all billionaires.
But more than that, here's where I knew, and I should have known then, but I still went along with the Democratic corporate position. John Kerry was a war hero.
Right.
He was swift-boated by draft dodgers.
Okay. John Kerry, what made John Kerry special is that he came back and he spoke out against the war. That's what made John Kerry, not that he was in Vietnam fighting a war. It's that he came back and said, what I did was wrong. That's what made John Kerry a war hero. But in America, in the America of the early aughts, the Democratic Party was ashamed of its anti-Vietnam War history. Pathetic. Corporate losers. And they turned him into somebody he wasn't. And guess what? Once he pretended to be some sort of conservative patriot, his statements against the Vietnam War were brought out against him. How could you be a hero in a war you think is wrong? This is what I'm talking about, generational boomer brain bullshit. Like, he came back, and this is what he said. He was on Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
Pardon me?
This is what made John Kerry special. And they deleted this. They deleted what made John Kerry, and they made him into a fucking Bush caricature, and they took him to the territory that Democrats should be in, which is, I'm a warmonger. I'm going to be good at the wars, too. We need to do a lot of wars. The American people don't want that.
I'm sure whenever people gather, there's always a tendency for some of the more emotional ones to do things which are even against their own interests. But I think you had deserved much of the credit. As I understand, you were one of the leaders of this.
I found it.
To prepare. I would like to talk representing all those veterans and say that several months ago in Detroit, we had an investigation at which over 150 honorably discharged and many very highly decorated veterans testified to war crimes committed in Southeast Asia.
Not isolated incidents, but crimes committed on a day-to-day basis with a full awareness of officers at all levels of command. It's impossible to describe to you exactly what did happen in Detroit, the emotions in the room, the feelings of the men who were reliving their experiences in Vietnam. But they did. They relived the absolute horror of what this country, in a sense, made them do. They told the stories of times that they had personally raped, cut off ears, cut off heads, taped wires from portable telephones to human genitals and turned up the power, cut off limbs, blown up bodies, randomly shot at civilians, razed villages in a fashion reminiscent of Genghis Khan, shot cattle and dogs for fun, poisoned food stocks, and generally ravaged the countryside of South Vietnam, in addition to the normal ravage of war and the normal and very particular ravaging which is done by the applied bombing power of this country. We called this investigation the Winter Soldier Investigation. The term Winter Soldier is a play on words of Thomas Paine's in 1776 when he spoke of the Sunshine Patriot and summertime soldiers who deserted at Valley Forge because the going was rough. And we who've come here to Washington have come here because we feel we have to be winter soldiers now. We could come back to this country and we could be quiet. We could hold our silence. We could not tell what went on in Vietnam. But we feel because of what threatens this country, the fact that the crimes threaten it, not reds and not redcoats, but the crimes which we're committing are what threaten it. And we have to speak out.
That's what made John Kerry special. That's what made John Kerry special. And a Democratic Party which had a fucking iota of self-respect would have been talking about that. It would have been opposing Bush and the crimes the neoconservatives were committing. And they would have said John Kerry served honorably, but he was honest. That's what made him honorable. And when he saw crimes the U.S. was committing, he spoke up as a young man. That is what John Kerry should have ran on. Not, I'm a fucking war hero or whatever nonsense these liberals are fucking talking about. And this is what separates me from them. This is what makes me slightly different than them. What separates me from them is I know what made John Kerry, and the John Kerry of 2004 deserved to lose.
By George W. Bush, the dumb one, the son, and Dick Cheney, who went predatorial style into poor.
The Brain Domain says, "Hi, comrades. I just hit 7,000 followers on Twitch, and I wanted to come by and pay respects because this would have happened without all the support from Mike and this community. Thank you all." Well, thank you, Joshua. Chat, one of my dear friends, Joshua, has a... Do you want an alternative to Dr. K that is actually, like, reasonably educated in psychology, but not a fucking hack? Please go watch Joshua. He has impeccable vibes, probably the best vibes on Twitch, and if you like those kind of slightly hippie vibes, but he's doing it from a position of credentials. He's actually educated. He's not just talking about psychology like a woo-woo bullshitter. He's somebody who is well trained in ideas like cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as talking about the benefits of, you know, of psychedelic mushrooms, whatever the fuck. Obviously administered moderately and responsibly. Smart, good vibes, but also rightfully skeptical of the psychiatry industry. Yeah, I call it that because America and capitalism and public corporations have damaged the practice of psychiatry as well and psychology. We're currently doing our holiday survival guide series. Thanks for the shout out. Oh, that sounds useful. How do you survive the holidays with your abusive family? And is some of your family that was abusive to you as a child, are they trying to apologize and reach out and rekindle the relationship? How do you handle that? Should you forgive? Should you forget? How do you heal? These are all questions that I think all of us ask. And I think Joshua is a great companion as you discover what your answer is. Sometimes it'll be no. Sometimes it'll be yes. Sometimes it will be cordial and nothing more. You know, that is part of the process of healing. So there's no one else better on Twitch than Joshua on that. And you're welcome. I'm in my socialist psychologist era. We are dismantling the institution, bringing healing back to the people. So true. I hate how psychiatry is literally a luxury good in this country. It's how upper middle class white people let you know they're upper middle class. They'll be like, oh, my therapist said, because who the fuck can afford a therapist? They pretend it's like, oh, I'm going to therapy. Look how evolved and advanced I am. But it's really like, look how rich I am. I can afford therapy. All right, let's keep going. Wait, what's the at? I just did a shout out. So you should be able to see it at the top of the chat window. It's the Brain Domain.
Neighborhoods to recruit the poorest people into the
Joshua,
military.
Did you see what mug I'm drinking out of? Chat, this is limited time available Casey Tron merch of Cult Coochie. I don't think it's available. Oh no, the Cult Coochie mug isn't available. Well, it looks like I've got myself a limited edition. They have a Christmas one. Well, everybody get going. My communist educated psychiatrist mother devoted her life to indigent schizophrenics because she felt 1 week of talking to depressed yuppies would have caused her to unalive herself. Honestly, I couldn't be a psychiatrist or a psychologist because if somebody came in and was like, I just feel depressed, doctor, I'd be like, jog around the block. That would be my treatment. I'd be like, get up, jog around the block. That would be my treatment. All right, anyway, let's keep going.
Sent their sons and daughters to Iraq. Not, John Kerry, who wouldn't even stand up for, not John Kerry, Dick Cheney.
Depression is a fake kind of guy? No. I'm talking about upper middle class yuppies feigning depression for sympathy. I'm not talking about actual clinical depression. I'm talking about upper class yuppies. Even yuppies get depressed. They should be depressed. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think one of the things that I like about the left is that all of you are so empathetic. You're even empathetic for the corporate drones who are happily destroying the planet. And I think that is a admirable feature that you have. And I consider it to be a desirable trait. I just don't possess it, which is why I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have empathy for everyone. I think some people destroy their souls by being evil. And if they do that evil with a spreadsheet or with a fucking gun, it's the same evil. So that's just me. This is short and relevant. Oh, okay, cool.
Congratulations. Therapy culture has fucked you up. Under the influence of the American dream, our TV screens became a mirror, showing us a better version of ourselves. A healthier, happy homeowner who harmonizes with life's purpose. Competition taught us that inequality is irrelevant. Everyone can be a success if they work hard enough. So we pulled up our bootstraps and dressed aspirational, but never learned how to iron our clothes. When our level playing field has potholes, we were told that failure is the risk that's reserved for the lazy. But on closer inspection, we can see that fortune favors the Balenciaga. And now, still seduced by the glow on our screens, we're no longer part of the audience. Social media has made us all unpaid cast members with hot takes and highlight reels, competing for the lead role as the star of the show in a movie that's all about you. Therapy culture has overprescribed self-obsession to the middle class, turning social issues we experience together into personal failings we unpack with a therapist. Because being sad is a conscious choice, and toxic positivity is a daily affirmation. When community collapsed, we all went to counselling, consoling ourselves in controlled environments, while compassionate voices we pay by the hour co-sign our beliefs and pretend that they like us. We were told to set boundaries, to manifest intentions, and to hold space for ourselves. But when we constantly draw our attention inward, our life, our thoughts, and our feelings become a brand campaign. How do I maximize my happiness, stay authentic to my true self, and cut all the toxic people out of my life? Because now that I'm the most important person in the world, I get to decide who those toxic people are. And if they don't fulfill their life's true purpose, which is to make me feel good, I'll detach with love and protect my space and let go of that which doesn't serve me. My energy is sacred. Therapy's great. A lot of people need it, especially the people who refuse to go. But the problem with therapy culture is it becomes our default social setting. Everything becomes about how you feel. Gaslighters wield their buzzwords like battering rams, weaponizing empathy to shine a light on all the shadow work you have to do. This oversaturation of therapeutic language does two things. It normalizes the culture of narcissism and entrenches the neoliberal worldview. Now that the world revolves around you, healing is done indoors, and your wellness is your responsibility. It's not capitalism's fault that you're crazy. It's your attachment style, or the mother wound, or your inner child needs a hug. We were told to sit with our feelings, so we sat alone for so long that we forgot what it felt like to be together. Therapy culture taught us to use our inner voice, but never to speak our truth. Just silent retreat and CBT our way out of a collapsing society, lighting an incense candle while the world goes up in flames. Good therapy isn't meant to validate all your decisions and behaviors. It's meant to challenge the dark aspects of yourself you want to keep buried. But in a consumer society, everything's designed to make us feel warm and fuzzy. And therapy culture is just an extension of this logic. Pop psychology encourages you to stand in your power, but really, you just have to stop calling your mother an energy vampire when you're the one who stole her anti-anxiety medication. In the absence of God, therapy culture has become a quasi-religious cult. The therapist's office is a modern-day confession box where we get absolved of our sins, seeking out a religious experience by other means. Because
I mean, honestly, I think that is, there's a book called, it's like, what is it, 200 Years of Psychotherapy, or the World's Getting Worse? And I think psychology and psychiatry is important. I think therapy is important. I think inner healing and inner strength is important. I agree with that. I don't want you to think that I'm just like anti-psychiatry or something. However, I think the problem is that most of your problems are because of shit life syndrome. The reason why you're depressed, you're much less likely to be depressed if you are in a supportive relationship, if you have housing security, if you have less stress at work, if you're taking vacations and time off, if you're exercising, if you're eating a healthy diet, right? Like all of those external factors affect your subjective perspective. It doesn't delete depression, but if somebody is somebody who is susceptible to depression, if their otherwise elements of their life are supportive, they may not be suffering from it. But if the other elements of their life are bad, it could push them into it. A lot of people are on marginal, and on the margins, things are getting worse. So more and more people are feeling psychologically depressed. And the reality is it's because their life is more depressing, and if you are somebody who suffers from depression because of genetics or your brain chemistry or whatever, if the rest of your life is supportive, It can help you build the coping mechanisms and the techniques that can help support whatever treatment plan you have to climb out of depression, so that you have a pathway forward towards the light, out of depression. But if the rest of your life is even more depressing, it's harder to break out. And these are straightforwardly obvious takes. And I feel like psychiatry is about making your problems individual. And that's why capitalists love it so much. It's not that your problems aren't individual at all. They are. They are in part individual. It's a synthesis between systemic causes and individual subjective locuses of control. Like, there's things that you can do to make your life better, but from the perspective of humanity, certain systems will make more people fucked over than others. My shrink said I am depressed because I have reasons in my life to be depressed. Oh no. In psychiatry, they call that shit life syndrome. Shit life syndrome is a phrase used by physicians in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia for the effect that a variety of poverty or abuse-induced disorders could have on patients.
You wouldn't even
okay, let's finish this this video and then we'll
Everyone
go
inside
back.
them has a hole to make whole. Some fill it with religion, sex, drugs, or politics, but the wound remains. Maybe we should stop trying to search for things to complete us. Maybe the wound is part of the design, and we don't need to hide it under our shirt sleeve. Let's acknowledge the pain inside each other. Realize it's not a you problem, it's a we problem. Because self-improvement is self-impoverishment, and we don't need a counseling app and a monthly subscription at Headspace. We just need each other.
I think we need to look at both internal and external factors, because ultimately we do have control over some aspects of our life, and that's what we can propel us forward. But we can't forget that improving structural aspects is key. It's hard to balance these. I'll give you an analogy to help you understand what I'm talking about. Let's imagine that there's a swamp you have to cross. There are two ways that we could have you cross that swamp. The first is society could look at that swamp and go, you know, 1 million people need to cross this swamp every year. What if we build a road or a bridge through it? And the brightest minds in society come to the swamp, they build a bridge. So now when you cross the swamp, instead of navigating through quicksands and bogs and grasping on slippery vines and fighting off alligators and snakes, you're walking on a paved and structurally sound bridge. Now, I could teach you how to navigate swamps. I could teach a navigate swamps class, and I could give you skills, and I could hand you a sharpened machete, and I could give you a map and a compass. And you know what? You'd be far more likely to successfully traverse the swamp. But much more people would successfully traverse it if there was a motherfucking bridge. Does that make sense? Our society is about handing out those machetes and saying, you know, if you're smart, you'll make it across, as opposed to building bridges so that everybody gets it across. And the societies that build bridges are the ones that succeed. And in our society, the rich have helicopters and the smart are handed machetes. And that's who succeeds. And I want to tell you that a good society takes the wealth from the rich, pays the smart people to build the bridge so that we all make it. That's what my politics are. My politics are, instead of a society that doesn't care for one another, we should be a society that builds. And what do you call a collection of bridges? A nation. That's what a nation really is. Because those investments that you make, the sum total of that infrastructure that you leave, is what creates a nation. And I think that's what Americans don't understand. That's what Americans don't get. They think that, like, oh, well, you know, if you're not smart enough to make it across the swamp, then you shouldn't cross the swamp. I don't want to stretch this analogy too much further by just saying a lot of getting across the swamp is luck. That's what people don't get. If you're the smartest, most effective swamp crosser, but there's a snake hidden behind a bush that you don't see, and he bites your ass halfway through the crossing and you die, you might have been able to cross that swamp 99 times out of 100, but the one time you got bad luck and you died. Or you could be an incompetent boob, but you, from random chance, wander through the swamp successfully and you make it to the other side. Luck is a tremendous factor that I think people underestimate. And that's why building bridges is better. Free healthcare for the swamp crossers. So true. The most depressing fact about American architecture is that it's designed to be obsolete as fast. I mean, it's just... There's a bridge over a swamp by me that in the 30s, it was boards and gravel. And now it's a bridge that transports workers building the most airliners in the world. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Washington, D.C. is built on a fucking swamp. That's what's incredible.
stand up for his own lesbian daughter. And what you said, Sam, that they operated from a defensive crouch. John Kerry did that to a T. And I remember my husband and I, we would stay up and watch Jon Stewart every night, because when you live in the Bible Belt and you're surrounded by people that think George W. Bush is so smart, you really have to tap the vein with, media that makes you feel like you're not going fucking crazy. So we watched Jon Stewart every night. Jon Stewart was peak then when he was bashing George W. Bush. And it just infuriated me that John Kerry then, who actually went and served in combat in Vietnam. My dad served in Vietnam. These people are damaged from that. There's a whole generation of dads out there that have PTSD and they were never allowed to deal with it because then you're a pussy if you go to a therapist. And they raised all of us. And Dad, I love you. Thank you for your service. But there is a lot there to the people that made it back home. And the fact that the Democratic Party, that's how much they fought back on that. It really pissed me off.
They were afraid. The reason why Kerry was vulnerable to that is because he really led with that, in the convention, for instance. Like, I don't know if you remember that 2004 convention, but it was so over the top, promoting his military service. And that, frankly, that was not the impressive thing about John Kerry. What was impressive about John Kerry is he came back and testified in front of the Senate.
Oh my God. Did I just precog this shit? When did this get published? I could not have watched it. It's literally impossible for me to have watched this. I literally precogged.
And said, who's going to be the last man to die for a mistake in Vietnam? And that was what was impressive about John Kerry as a young man.
Exactly.
And they were so afraid of being seen as weak in the war on terror that they had to sort of get.
Every time a Democrat is like, I don't want to look weak, they make the biggest mistakes in history. This is what they ran with, chat.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
These are the same people telling you to support Brad Lander, by the way. The people that came up with this shit are the ones going, Brad Lander, we should support Brad Lander. He's a Zionist, yes, but support Brad Lander. Replace the Zionist with another Zionist. What the fuck's the point? What the fuck is the point?
Out in front of their skis, and John Kerry basically made it possible for the swift boating to have an impact on him.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that it's connected, this same mentality of John Kerry, like you said, highlighting the military service and not the standing up for principle after the fact? And do you think that that's connected in the same way that Democrats want to try to appeal to patriarchal Republican voters, the same way that Kamala Harris trotted around with Liz Cheney, and the same way that when Rahm Emanuel was on my podcast, he threw trans people under the bus? There is this pussy-ish nature of Democrats where they are pining for the approval of establishment Republicans, and they're never going to give it to them.
No, they're never going to give it to them. First off, I really enjoyed that moment with Rahm Emanuel. I really have a strong distaste for that guy. I think that is the same impulse. And the same idea that, what Harris did was just complete malpractice. Because she's going around, every election now is a change election. And she's going around with a Republican to say, we agree. She's basically saying, he's the outsider. And that's what people want. She's saying we're the establishment and he's the one who's going to come in and shake up the apple cart. And in a change election, you want that person. So the idea that she was going to convince, these supposed moderate Republicans, first of all, they don't really ultimately exist. To the extent that they exist, they want their tax cuts. And they know who's going to give it to them.
Yep.
And they don't care about the rest of the stuff.
Yep.
I mean, to the extent that there are moderate Republicans who don't subscribe to, the rest of the conservative movement stuff, they want their tax cuts and they don't care about anything else. And so it doesn't matter if Lynn Cheney is there. It doesn't matter. She could have gone around with Dick Cheney. She could have gone around with it doesn't matter. She could have gone around with George Bush. All she's communicating is to the people who are actually sort of like go back and forth, as to who they're going to vote for and don't really have a deep sort of connection or understanding of politics. Those people just want something different. They just want change.
So she enforced her, we are the establishment,
100%.
even by part. I agree with that.
That was the whole argument, right? Like he's outside of the system. We're like, she literally promoted what he was running on. And we live in a country where 4 years is a lifetime in terms of remembering what Donald Trump was like, and people will forget 12
January
months after
6th.
he's gone. Oh,
they forgot
January 6th. I mean, they forgot. They forgot everything. At one point on that Air America show, we would have Gore Vidal on quite a bit. Janine Garofalo and I hosted this show, and Gore Vidal came on, and he had just written a book. I think it was called The United States of Amnesia, and I didn't really appreciate or understand what he was. I really didn't feel what he was experiencing, and again, watching George W. Bush get reformed in the eyes of the public, and having, Rachel Maddow go to Dick Cheney's.
That was so weird. What was that about?
Weird.
I think that she has a streak of politics that find the establishment, particularly foreign policy people, okay.
I just felt, I thought that was just very strange because I remember what Dick Cheney and Karl Rove and George W. Bush did. They got the marriage amendment on states so that they could pull out evangelical voters intentionally
100%.
To vote on family values. And it drove a lot of people to the polls to vote against marriage. The whole time, Dick Cheney has a lesbian daughter.
Yeah.
And so the Cheneys, I thought Kamala was going to win up until the moment that she started trotting around with Liz Cheney. And here, I agree with your take, but here was my take on it. I remember specifically Liz Cheney, and this is on video, lying. One of the biggest lies told in American politics that harms women in red states beyond measure is the lie
you're talk about.
that there's a fourth term.
Have you read A People's History of the U.S.? Of course. That's like a classic. Like everybody, if you want to get people on the course of coming to the left, you show them Howard Zinn book and a Michael Moore documentary. You know what I mean? That's the regular lib path to start going to the left. Those are the most kind of if you see somebody who we identified as a Democrat and they're interested in kind of more left-wing stuff, you can start showing them things like that. Democracy Now! Is another great place to go.
Abortion.
Yes.
And that doctors and nurses murder
2019
babies after
she
they're
was
born.
up at a
and
press
she
conference.
said that.
I have that
she
burned
said
in my
that
memory.
on tape. And that type of propaganda and that lie is so diabolical. There are women in our home state right now in Oklahoma who are pregnant. They're excited about it. They go to get an ultrasound and there's something catastrophic with the fetus. They are unable to get health care. And then the government has institutionalized.
Have you read Settlers? I have read This Time Out.
Shame on them, and they have to travel to another state to receive health care. And it's Liz Cheney incubated this anti-woman policy.
Would you consider Parenti's works to be too advanced for libs? Nah. But again, don't read Settlers. Read Parenti is a great play. Settlers was written by a CIA agent. So it's one of those... It's part of what they do, what they call the compatible left. Basically, the purpose of a lot of the CIA's interference with left-wing politics is to promote the most anti-solidaristic, the most anti-internationalist, the most splitter versions of it. So Sakai is a CIA agent. And Settlers is basically just the idea that international leftism cannot exist. It's one of those, that's basically the idea. The idea is that, it's kind of, there's a whole strain of liberal politics, which are basically doomerism. And I think if somebody cottons to that, they're actually worse than an apolitical person, because they're just a waste of time and they end up causing infighting and a reaction. And it's just useless. It has no value whatsoever. Literally none. So I just don't tolerate that.
And Dick Cheney and George W. Bush incubated this anti-LGBTQ plus shit. And to me, we can trot around with Liz Cheney if she atones for that, because I believe that people can politically evolve. But if you don't atone for it, no trotting around. Tough titties, Liz. We're not trotting around with you.
I think I agree with you that people can atone for that. I still think it would have been just an enormous malpractice.
I do too. I do too.
Regardless of whatever was in her heart. But yes, she got up there in 2019. She was at a podium with a bunch of other Republicans. She talked about post-birth abortion.
Which is murder. Which doesn't happen.
And she said Democrats are in favor of killing babies after they're born. And not only that, the most chilling moment I remember from that era with George W. Bush was when he did a primetime address from the Oval Office talking about wanting a constitutional amendment, a national constitutional amendment, federal constitutional amendment to make marriage only for straight people.
Yep.
And it was so chilling that we were at a point where you're going to codify the second-class citizenship of gay people at that point. And that's all been memory hole. People memory hole like the torture, the spying. I mean, so much of the war on terror. We are now seeing this build out in the context of you can trace the equipment that ICE has and that the militarization of our police have back to that era. And
you can also trace in red states the rampant homophobia, transphobia, and anti-women's health care and misogynist laws were incubated during those 8 years, and they really took such a hold. And gay people and trans people and women in these red states, particularly the poorest that cannot flee, are suffering.
Yep.
And it all took foot under this brand of compassionate conservatism.
Right.
The family values Republican voter who defines that if you are a lesbian and you have a lesbian wife and you've adopted kids, that you're not a family.
Yep.
And it's so inherently anti-family, and it still permeates, and it set the psychological soil for what now is worst.
I think one of the things about this specific idea, and I want to talk about this as an idea for a second, and I'm going to say something that is going to be provocative to some people, but common sense to others, which is all families are made up. Like all families are just made up. They're not, they're a social structure. There is a biological reality that there is a motive gamete and the cell, the egg cell gamete. That and then there's a uterus that gestates. That's about it. Those are the biological facts of sexual reproduction. But whether the father sticks around and becomes an authority figure, or whether the sperm donor is basically unknown, it's a construct. The only real relationship you have that's biologically connected, that full and involves a long-term commitment, is a mother with a child. But even then, under social structures, it could still be collective. These are decisions we make. And I don't say that to undermine the concept of family. I think having familial obligation is a good idea in general. And it intuitively feels right to me. I like caring about, it is what it is. But whether you have a matriarchal structure where men stay with their moms and their matriarchal line, and they live in their mom's and house, or you have a patriarchal structure where lineages are passed down through male lines. These are just arbitrary decisions that were made. It's not something that is like handed down by God. Okay. And there is no, quote, natural order. So a lesbian family adopting a child is just as much of a legitimate social structure as the nuclear family, which is an innovation that is very recent. You know why it's recent? Because it's called nuclear. And the concept of the nucleus of the atom is not very old. I don't know if you guys know this, but a nucleus of an atom was discovered in 1911. So when somebody says it's a nuclear family, that's not that old. That's like, you know, a little over 100 years old. So when people pretend like the nuclear family is some sort of deep tradition, no, it's fucking not. No, it's fucking not. It's younger than trains, younger than electric light. Don't you think the concept predated the word? No. People lived in multi-generational households for most of human history. They also had extended family like aunts and nieces and nephews and cousins. So no. Quick question. Why do you think in the Western world it is the norm to shame men who want to stay at home? Why is it that way is what I'm asking. Because in our society, shame is one of the ways which we control behavior. And in our society, we have a patriarchal society where men are assumed to be engaged in productive labor for profit. So in order to help ensure that men engage in the capitalist wage economy, we use social concepts like shame in order to control behavior. We shame stay-at-home men because we want them to get a job so the capitalists can profit from their surplus value. Not complicated.
Which is Stephen Miller and Donald Trump's Gestapo reign. And then now I'm concerned about the psychological soil that this administration is setting for after biology catches up with Trump. What is fucking next? Because the Republican Party gets progressively more diabolical and more evil, Sam.
Yep. I mean, I agree. And I think for too long, we've had Democratic leadership who has said, I mean, Obama said that the fever is going to break. Biden said the fever is going to break. I mean, they said it over and over and over again. You know, when Obama got elected, you know, they were calling him, in addition to saying that he wasn't born in America, which was obviously, and that's what sort of gave birth to Donald Trump's political career. They were, you know, carrying around monkeys on nooses and stuff like this. And he's like, well, the fever's going to break. And he said that in 08, he said that in 10, he said that in 12, he said that in 14 and 16. And then Biden started saying it. I mean, and that's not the way this goes. This is not a fever. This is not, they haven't caught a cold. This is what the movement is built upon. And, we are seeing the effects of an era of Democrats who just weren't aware of what's going on. I mean, there are Democrats now who I think I am, to the left of ideologically, but understand partisanship, which is different from necessarily having like progressive values or whatnot. I mean, I think the Democratic Party, I think, is definitely to the left of where it was 20 years ago, broadly speaking, on economic terms, not so much from 40 or 50 years ago, but from 20 years ago, because we were in the wilderness for a while. But even in those areas where I would disagree ideologically with some of these Democrats, at least they, I think, are aware of like, there's a partisan fight to be had here. And you have to engage in it. You can't, things like, let's get rid of the filibuster, I think is a really important test, regardless of what your ideological backing is. To the extent that people don't want to get rid of the filibuster, it's a good indication that they don't want to own the things they vote for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you have to be very suspicious of a politician who doesn't want to own what they vote for, because they're probably voting for something that most people, if they were really aware of it, wouldn't be happy with them about. I mean, this is what we hear with Republicans all the time. This is why, they're cutting, now they're talking about the Obamacare extensions, the payments.
I don't know if you guys heard this, but 12 Republicans have crossed the aisle to join Democrats to try to overrule Mike Johnson and Trump in order to get the Obamacare subsidies to be reenacted.
The subsidies as being rife with fraud and abuse.
Right.
They keep having to go back to the fraud and abuse because they don't want to concede to the American public. We're just kicking people off of food stamps. Yeah. We're just kicking people off of health insurance. We're just kicking people off of Medicaid. We're going to kick people off of Medicare eventually if they get their way. We'll kick people off of Social Security because of all the, Social Security disability fraud and abuse. it is a way of avoiding taking responsibility for policies that they have the vast majority of people would be against. And the filibuster is another one of those things. So, like for me, a big litmus test for a politician, let's say going into the Senate, is will you get rid of the filibuster? Mm-hmm. I mean, putting aside like any ideological differences, will you make sure that you own your votes and make the Republicans own their votes, right? And so
just principle.
Well, it's not. It's democracy.
Yes,
but not like an academic, theoretical notion of democracy. I mean, the reason why democracy is good, and it's like, in this era, I think it's particularly incumbent upon people to make this case because there's a bunch of monarchists,
totally
authoritarians.
Yeah.
The reason why democracy is good is because it brings about outcomes that are the best outcomes for the most amount of people because the process demands it, a democratic process. And so, from my perspective, like my politics are to democratize more things, democratize the workplace more, democratize our policy choices. And that leads to sort of like making sure that you constrain people's political power if it is outsized to the person to the left or right of them, or you increase the political power of people who might be marginalized in society. So that's where like my support of things that are like antitrust. Because if you have a concentration of economic power, it ends up becoming a concentration of political power. And, there's not an infinite amount of political power. Political power is a dynamic. If somebody has a lot of it, that means that there's a lot of people who have a little of it.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
All right, listen up. Last minute gift shoppers, I'm going to make your life so easy. What you need to do is buy your loved ones or friends an Aura frame. These are the perfect gifts because you can absolutely personalize them. So what you do is you upload unlimited photos and video onto the Aura app, connect to Wi-Fi, and then it's on your gift.
The Aura. They got Aura. This is Aura. This is the product that got Aura.
Just your grievances. I know that we've discussed them.
I have many.
I know, but I just have to ask all of our guests.
I don't think it's a terrible idea, actually. But
you had it with. So Sam Cedar, what have you had it with?
Well, I guess leading into that, I could say billionaires. You hear, maybe you've heard people say like every billionaire is a policy failure. And I subscribe to that notion. In the greatest economic, period of greatest economic.
Hey, chat, recession indicator. Home prices go negative for the first time in over 2 years and may stay that way for a while. Active listings in November were 13% higher than last year, but new listings were just 1.7% higher. Home prices are down 1.4% in the last 3 months. Home prices have finally come down compared with last year, though just fractionally, according to daily reads from Parcel Labs, which looks at high-frequency listing data on single-family homes, condos, and townhomes, both new and existing. Home prices have not gone negative since mid-2023, a year after the Federal Reserve first brought rates up from zero and mortgage rates moved sharply higher. It's nothing like the great financial crisis when home prices dropped 27% from their peak in 2006 to their trough in 2012. Prices in Austin, Texas are down 10% last year. In Denver, they're down 5%. Tampa, Florida, and Houston saw prices drop 4%. Atlanta and Phoenix saw price decreases of 3%. Cleveland gained 6%. Chicago and New York City saw 5%. Philadelphia saw 3%. Pittsburgh and Boston saw 2%. I mean, this is people basically going to markets that are like that are undervalued and leaving markets that are overvalued.
Expansion we had in this country, and more importantly, the greatest period of economic parity. So there was less wealth disparity happened in the wake of World War II, and obviously a lot of spending going on here. But when you have less economic disparity, that means that more people are sharing in the wealth that the country is producing. And during, from like the 50s and through the 60s, the top marginal tax rate for this country was 90%. Yep. So if you made over $470,000, it ebbed and flowed a little bit, but let's, which is approximately $3 million in today's money. Every dollar over $3 million, your first $3 million gets taxed, maybe effective tax rate is somewhere around like 30% or 25% at that time. But every dollar after that gets taxed at a 90% rate. So if you make $4 million, the first $3 million, 30% taxes, but that last million, $900,000 of that goes to the government. And during that time, when we had tax rates like that for 20 years in this country, 20 years, the least amount of wealth disparity that we've had in this country, the greatest economic expansion we've had in this country. And today, we have just an incredible amount of wealth disparity, both in the context of like billionaires, which is problematic because you can see it, for instance, like in education. Mm-hmm. Bill Gates, people, have different feelings about Bill Gates. Some people think he's like, sort of this benevolent billionaire. There is no such thing as a benevolent billionaire. It's like saying there's a benevolent king. They're oligarchs. It doesn't matter. No one should wake up in the morning and go, I have an idea for education, and be able to put in so much money into education. He dumped $1 billion in a small experiment up in the Northwest, but then created all of these mechanisms in which would feed into that. And so the entire education system in this country moved towards high-stake testing, value-added teaching, all of these experiments which demoralized teachers, ended up hurting kids. And in 2017, about 10 years after the start of this, or 15 years after the start of this experiment, they hired the Rand Corporation.
Mike, what would be your policy strategy to crack down on using capital gains to dodge income taxes? I would normalize capital gains rates to be the same as income. I would tax loans made for the purpose of consumption. So, for example, if somebody got a loan in order to consume against something like stocks, they should have to pay a tax. I would also tax stock buybacks at the same rate as the dividend tax. Sign an international tax treaty and banking transparency treaty, and I would force every country to have banking transparency. Like these are some policies that would be very, 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 very easy to implement and would make it much easier to pay attention to all that shit.
The Gates Foundation did do a study, assess how we did. And the Rand Corporation came back and said, it was a mistake. It was a total failure. You should have listened to teachers. And they never listened to teachers because it doesn't have to. Right. That's the problem. It's so anti-democratic. You don't need to have people who have, who are stakeholders at the table. If you have that kind of economic power, you have that kind of political power.
This is the biggest problem with America, and this is part of the reason that Trump got elected. We've worshipped capitalism and money so much that we think that if somebody is a billionaire, we give them the affirmative action of intelligence.
100%.
And then we think they can step outside of their area of expertise and do anything.
Or luck. I mean, in their area of expertise, listen, if you become a billionaire, in addition to having a tremendous amount of luck, you've also exploited a tremendous
100%.
amount of other people's luck.
You have. But you see like Joe Rogan, and he's so obsequious to billionaires. He has all these billionaires on all the time, and he just, you can tell he's in awe, and he gives them this ridiculous transference of, oh, this person must be brilliant because clearly he loves money so much. This same thing with Donald Trump. He projected, I'm such a great billionaire to the public, and they bought into it when he is a horrible businessman. He squandered his trust fund. He bankrupted casinos. He's a grifter. I mean, an unbelievable grifter, but there's a problem with the worship of wealthy people. And I think it's twofold. It's easy right now to caricaturize these billionaires, like Elon Musk, total piece of shit. Zuckerberg went on TV and said, I feel like men have been neutered. I mean, I think what a piss boy. All right. So you can talk about what pussies each of them are individually. But that's somewhat intellectually lazy because it's the system that has allowed these people to become where they are, and then a culture that props them up and idolizes them and attributes intelligence and expertise to them that they simply don't have.
Well, you remember, like, George W. Bush was like supposedly the first CEO president, right? I mean, that's how they sold him.
Yes, I do.
And you had Paul Ryan at the time telling these fake stories about how, you know, a kid who comes to school with and has to get a free school lunch. He feels badly about this. He wants a brown bag lunch. I mean, he told this fake story that was like not even his story. Somebody else had made it up. But the point is that they were basically saying you are more morally righteous if you're wealthy.
Yes.
And so when Donald Trump came down that escalator, I was actually, back in those days, I was doing MSNBC. I was in the green room, and I would do Chris Hayes's, and I think we did like a Mystery Science 3000 when he was coming down the escalator. And I said, dude, he's going to win because they have built, I didn't think he would win the general election, but I'm like, the Republicans have built a system where it's like, if you have money, you are necessarily morally more righteous. So my attitude was like, Donald Trump's going to walk on the stage and he's going to go, I'm a billionaire. And everything I say is right. Everything you say is wrong because I've got more money than you.
The prosperity gospel has also soiled the psyche for that as well. I mean, Trump grew up in all of that. In her evangelical home, they give rich people can do a lot more things with impunity. Talked about that.
Well, it's just, I was raised in where it was, well, you have more, you're entitled to more, you're entitled to pass judgment on people that have
God
less.
blessed you more.
And I was special. I was unique because I was God's blessing. And luckily I was white and from privilege. You know, so it was this whole, I had no idea how to operate in the real world. My world was not real. It was insulated by all these other factors. And it wasn't until I had real problems where I had to confront that. But there's an entitlement taught in church and in Republican families that you're better.
Yeah.
You get to, and I do believe, because I remember demonizing the poor people. I remember comments in my home about what people bought with food stamps, like soda pop versus milk. I remember those comments so well. And now I realize it was all about victimizing poor people so we could have more.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's the way that, you know, you justify exploiting people. That's the way you justify, like, sort of saying, you know, the Republicans today say, like, well, you know, the people on Medicaid, they can go out into the in the fields and pick. We can, you know, train them. You know, they're just loafing around, you know, as if like there's people who, like, I'm not going to work so that I can get free health care at age 25 or something. Like, that's just, no one thinks that way. And to the extent that there are, you know, just like, because we live in a world where there's, you know, there's a wide range of people, to the extent that there are those people who would do that. Like, I'm not going to work, I'm just going to get Medicaid. It's you either have a choice of, like, some of those will get health care and versus we're going to kick kids or people who desperately need it off.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, for me, you know, we should have just universal health care. We should have a single payer. It's
So you brought up Paul Ryan, and I've been reminded a lot lately of the hot mic moment, whoever recorded Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy talking about Donald Trump, and this is years ago, being on Putin's payroll, being compromised. And that was a pretty big moment. And they, you know, these are Republicans talking to Republicans, asshole buddies on a break from, you know, being in the House. Somebody recorded it and leaked it. And I forget who the other guy that they said, the guy isn't in Congress anymore, but he's a California congressman that they threw under the bus as well. And then at the end of it, Paul Ryan goes, hey, this is just friends. We're not going to share this. And then you see what has happened foreign policy wise with Steve Witkoff, who by all accounts seems like a Russian asset. Jared Kushner, who has no business whatsoever doing any sort of negotiations with Vladimir.
Guys, Trump is just treating the American government like he's a Saudi royal family. What the fuck is this?
You know, when she goes on television, Fox, like, I mean, they dominate. They dominate when she gets up there with that beautiful face and those lips that don't stop, up, like a little machine gun. You know, when she goes on television, Fox, like, I mean, they dominate. They dominate when she gets up there with that beautiful face and those lips that don't stop.
He's talking about the first 20-year-old that I think looks like they're 40. Like, legitimately, she looks 40. She's 27? Or is she 28? Something like that. Okay, she's 28. That's the touched up picture. But I swear she looks so old.
Putin. And you see how Vladimir Putin is literally calling all of the shots, who he's weakly positioned. He's not even paying his military right now. We're abandoning, any support for Ukraine. And I think now that, I think it's safe to say that the entire Republican Party is pretty much compromised by Russia, that Putin has kind of taken.
What is the justification for the United States of America to be involved in Europe? In propping up a war in Ukraine? What is our national security imperative here?
And over.
I don't know if I think that they are compromised outside of the fact that I think they're just trying to enrich themselves. And I think I don't think that, I think Witkoff, to the extent that he's not up to it, it's because we're projecting onto Witkoff the idea that he's there trying to represent some iteration of United States foreign policy, where I think what he's trying to do is make money. And right. And I think that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. And I think that's I think that's it. I think a lot more stuff makes sense if you just assume they're there. If you live in a small town, sometimes you see this in terms of the politics there, where it's business people perceive local government as just an extension of their business. I'm going to sit on this county board, and when we get a grant from the state,
right.
I'm going to hand that over to my buddy, and my buddy is going to come over, and he's the one who's going to give me the contract to dig the ditches that he needs dug, or that he's doing for the school, and that's all it is. And I think Donald Trump has come in with that same sort of mentality, and he's basically saying to all these people, yeah, go for it. Just make sure I get a taste. And that's basically it's mafia. It's mafia. Yeah. It's built on that sort of same mafia thing. Now, I also, I have different theories about what Donald Trump would not want to come out at different points. Mike,
do you not think Putin has imperialistic ambitions in Europe? If Putin had imperialist ambitions, why isn't he taking over Azerbaijan? Why isn't he going after the stands? Right? Why you know what I mean? Why not just go reabsorb all those Central Asian former Soviet states that don't have any kind of alliances of any significance? It doesn't make sense. It seems that it makes more sense that it is about countering the United States cooing a pro-Russian government and then installing a pro-US government, and then putting a bunch of spying stations and CIA agents into Ukraine. It's not that complicated, right? You could just see it as a strategic, I think a border country being filled with enemy an adversary weapons and bases is probably a threat to your security. It's not that complicated. I don't think if Mexico suddenly had 80 fucking Chinese bases with listening devices all over the southern border of the US, you would probably see it as hostile. And there isn't. And Russia, and by the way, Putin is our guy. Putin is our guy. Yeltsin was our guy. Putin is our guy. The Russia of today is the American Russia. The Russia that we designed, the Russia that we facilitated, the Russia that we created. We facilitated every major Russian oligarch with direct support. What are we doing? What are we kidding here?
I think it's just as likely the Epstein stuff shows that he's, maybe involved in money laundering or financial stuff, or was
blowing Bubba.
Why is Jay Sakai? Because I don't trust CIA agents, and I don't agree with any message that says that historically the book is illiterate and poorly written. It's factually wrong. 2, it has a provocative, the only reason we talk about it is social media. I think I might actually just start banning people for saying the name Sakai at this point, because it's just such a waste of my time. I'm tired of it at this point. I have read it. I think if you like it, you're a midwit. I legitimately think if you like it, you're stupid. I really think, and it bothers me that much that you think it has anything that's intelligent about it. It's just wrong factually. Like, the things that are in the book are not correct. You fell for a scam book. It's embarrassing.
I think we talked about a different theory about that blowing Bubba, that it was a euphemism for something else, about those pictures of him. But I think it's more like...
I think the main problem with the book is whenever you talk about it, you just attract the most annoying people on the planet.
More likely that maybe he was, that he was in a position of like, a lot of money laundering. And I suspect, you don't get away with that money laundering unless you were sort of working with different alphabet soups, in the government that might have been using you as a way of tracing other things. I mean, I could go into a long thing, but there was Wayne Barrett was the Village Voice reporter who did the most coverage of Donald Trump. He died on the day that that Trump was inaugurated the first time of cancer. And I had interviewed him a couple of times. I had interviewed him for years and years, but a couple of times in the run up to that election. And he kept saying this guy, Felix Sater. And I don't know if you remember Felix Sater. He was a character in the Trump saga in the first Trump administration. But he was he worked for Trump at one point. He was a special, whatever it was. He had a business card. His office was in Trump Tower. But he also was an asset for the CIA and the FBI and Loretta Lynch, was it? Maybe I'm saying her name wrong, but she wrote an affidavit in support of this guy, got him off of a charge of sticking somebody with a champagne flute in a bar fight. And he was supposedly the guy that maybe have gotten bin Laden's cell phone number. And he thought he was going to jail with Stone at one point, and then he just sort of disappeared. We never heard from him again. But he was, I think, a conduit for money laundering. It would be my guess.
Yeah.
And this is just my opinion. It's totally speculative and, not actionable in any way. But that's my guess. He was tied up in some stuff. And, you don't get the phone number of bin Laden unless you're engaging in some international sort of stuff that is probably not. And so, I don't know. I grew up in with Whitey Bulger up in Massachusetts. And I think that I think those type of things happen.
Yeah. Okay. There's been a huge shift in the public's thoughts and polling around Israel, the country. And you're Jewish.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that live in flyover states, like Pumps and I have the majority of our lives, you don't live around a large Jewish population. You certainly don't hardly live around any Palestinians or even any Arabs for that matter. And so if you live in a red state like we have, you're kind of more focused on local government, that, abortion and, gay rights, and they're trying to put the 10 Commandments.
All to one, a book that would do numbers, talking about the way settlers is wrong. I'd rather shoot myself with a gun.
In schools and all this chicken shit, horrible shit, right? Well, then you start seeing these images. That everybody's mad in the Middle East. And that's just generally from my adult life. I'm like, oh, yeah, they're always fighting over there. Yeah, I'm in Oklahoma fighting, these Christian nationalists. I can't take that on right now. And then you start seeing these images of what's happening in Palestine, and you find out that this military is bombing schools and hospitals. And then you hear reports, very valid ones, where children have been executed, bullets in the head or in the chest, and you keep hearing more and more and more. And then you find out that I kept reading and reading into it, that Benjamin Netanyahu was funding Hamas to try to stay in power. And then you just are so outraged at the blank check from Joseph Robinette Biden all the way to Donald Trump. And then you start speaking out about it. And and then people get on you, call you, that you're anti-Semitic for speaking out against egregious war crimes and human rights violations. And it's something that is been really traumatizing for me personally to realize, as I've had like Cory Booker and other politicians on, that I really love. Like, as a person in a red state, I was like, well, this person is wonderful. That what a wonderful politician this man is. And when you realize that AIPAC spent as much money as Elon Musk did to get Donald Trump elected, but they're controlling our opposition as well. Yep. I want to pull my hair out by my root, one by one, because it is just like, are you fucking kidding me? And then that poor Miss Rachel, who's the most darling Mr. Rogers of our time, they're calling her an anti-Semite. And so I have multiple questions for you. Number one, in very simple terms, what is a Zionist? And then number two,
what is a Zionist? Okay, this is very simple. A Zionist is someone who believes that the constructed identity of Israeli Jewish person should have exclusive claim on territory that was taken by force in Palestine in 1948, and that there should be a state called Israel where there is a Jewish supremacist apartheid system maintained. That's a Zionist.
Do you think these far right Jewish groups are diluting the dangers of what anti-Semitism is? And why are they seeking refuge? From my vantage point, I'm an atheist. I've never been indoctrinated in any religion. The most anti-Semitic things that I see are on the MAGA side, the Young Republican chat group, Elon Musk doing Sig Heils, all of that, far more than I see from a Zoran Mamdani or anybody on the left. So will you speak to that in terms that a lot of our listeners, Sam, all across America, these beautiful blue dots in blue states, but a lot of blue dots in red states, we don't know other than what corporate media has told us for decades regarding this. So what's a Zionist, and then anti-Semitism, and how fucked are we?
I mean, I think, you know, the most simplistic version of a Zionist is someone who believes that it is okay for there to be an ethno-state, a Jewish ethno-state, in the land of Palestine. And I think, you know, what's problematic with it is that ultimately it leads to, well, there's two things. One, it's a colonial project in an era where much of the not this country, but certainly colonial projects of that era have been largely decolonized. And that's part of that Zionism. And part of it is also that it leads to an apartheid system.
I got to back up and listen to what he said. Okay.
Do you think these far right Jewish groups are diluting the dangers of what anti-Semitism is? And why are they seeking refuge? From my vantage point, I'm an atheist. I've never been indoctrinated in any religion. The most anti-Semitic things that I see are on the MAGA side, the Young Republican chat group, Elon Musk doing Sig Heils, all of that, far more than I see from a Zoran Mamdani or anybody on the left. So will you speak to that in terms that a lot of our listeners, Sam, all across America, these beautiful blue dots in blue states, but a lot of blue dots in red states, we don't know other than what corporate media has told us for decades regarding this. So what's a Zionist, and then anti-Semitism, and how fucked are we?
I mean, I think, you know, the most simplistic version of a Zionist is someone who believes that it is okay for there to be an ethno-state, a Jewish ethno-state, in the land of Palestine. And I think, you know, what's problematic with it is that ultimately it leads to, well, there's two things. One, it's a colonial project in an era where much of the not this country, but certainly colonial projects of that era have been largely decolonized. And that's part of that Zionism. And part of it is also that it leads to an apartheid system at best. at best.
When you say
right?
ethno-state, for clarity, this is kind of like Jewish supremacy.
Yeah.
That Jewish people in Palestine would have premier rights over indigenous Palestinians?
Correct.
Okay.
And I mean, that's what it is in practice. And, you know, I think...
And that's why if somebody says they're a Zionist, they are a Jewish supremacist. That's what that means. That's what that means. It is a psychotic position to take. To be a supremacist in 2025, that's why you can't be a progressive Zionist. Like, that is a batshit crazy position to believe that one group of people, however you define that group, is superior to other groups. Batshit crazy.
There's, for me, having grown up, you know, when I was...
So much of Zionism right from the get is saying, what if Hitler was entirely correct about Jews, but his mistake was not understanding those are good things and they were founded an entire nation based on those stereotypes and ethnic prejudices? I wouldn't put it like that. In fact, I don't think you're putting it like that either. I think you're just giving a hypothetical that the way that Zionism is being practiced right now and the Israeli far right and their supporters are acting is aiding and abetting the stereotypes that anti-Semites spread. Okay, like I'm pretty sure that you're not saying that. You're not saying that. You're saying that that's what people like Nick Fuentes are going to say, and that's what's going to cause anti-Semitism to build. And I completely I do think there are people that are vile Jewish supremacists, racists. And if you look at what they said and then you then applied your reaction to all Jewish people, that would be fucking terrible. Just like, and it's an absurdity because like Hitler was saying that German race is superior to all other races. If somebody says the Jewish ethnicity is superior to all ethnicities, it's the same kind of argument, just a different ethnicity is being posited as the best or the most powerful or whatever. In case you haven't covered the encroaching censorship, yeah. And I will say this, Zionist groups are the font of fascism in America. I'm not gonna say it. There's no other way of saying it. Zionist groups are dedicated to censoring their opponents, to targeting any opponents to the genocide of Gaza, and they are oftentimes a font of fascism in America. And many of them claim to represent all Jewish people. Now, I don't believe that they do. And the vast majority of American Jews oppose what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing in Israel. But the opinion of Zionism is, and it should be opposed. And I don't care if a majority of Jews identify as Zionists. That's not anti-Semitic to oppose that. Just like it wasn't anti-white to oppose apartheid or Jim Crow. And if the majority of white people in South Africa supported apartheid, I didn't give a shit. I don't care if the majority of white people in the South supported Jim Crow. I don't give a fuck. It is a racial discrimination is wrong. Period.
Bar mitzvah, we were only, 35 years out from the end of the Holocaust. Many of my Hebrew school teachers were Holocaust survivors.
Wow.
Much of like what we were taught in Hebrew school was about the Holocaust, and sort of like that was the predicate. And then the way you'd end that was Israel. And so there was a lot of like, I think there's obviously a tremendous amount of trauma that comes out of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And the founding of the state, starting with the Balfour Declaration, was largely for the West to have some form of hegemony in that area, some form of some like beachhead in that area as oil becomes more important. And from a Jewish perspective, I mean, there was certainly like movements that were anti-Zionist within Judaism, not just like very religious, like the Saddamers, ultra-Orthodox, who feel that you shouldn't have Israel until the Messiah returns. But there were also the Bundists who were also against Zionism as being racist and being sort of supremacist. And there were some prominent Zionists who sort of left Hannah Arendt and I think Albert Einstein, who were like sort of Zionists at one point and then sort of left because they realized like this is going to lead to something bad.
Were you kind of raised to be
I mean,
Zionist? Was it set up?
I don't think I was like, I as a child, I never, really used the word Zionists.
Right.
It wasn't something that was in the parlance, at least in my world. I was supportive of Israel and perceived Israel as like,
Your
an
homeland?
extension of my Jewishness. I went there when I was 15 as part of like my confirmation class. And the beginning of my disillusion with Israel happened while I was there because we were in the northern part of Israel and we saw like 30 attack helicopters go up low over the beach. And those were the ones who had bombed Beirut. And later
How old were you? 15, you said?
I was like 14 or 15. Okay. And I had a big argument with my rabbi at the time. I'm like, we, and I would have said we at that point.
Yeah, I have seen the Thai Cambodian border clashes. I have actually seen that. I haven't. I'm monitoring it.
We're not supposed to. We're not.
Nice.
We don't do that.
Right.
Like we respond. We respond to. It's defense forces. We respond to attacks, but we don't
attack.
And it wasn't until the 80s, and I wasn't aware of it until like into the aughts, or maybe the late 90s, that there was a moment in Israeli history which was akin to the moment in our history about the Reconstruction. So you had something called the Dunning School in this country that taught that the Reconstruction failed because black people were unable to be politicians and have a political class. And then Eric Foner comes around and a new breed of historians who look back and go, that's not what happened. There were pogroms. Like you had murders of politicians in South Carolina and people driven out and, Oklahoma, I mean, Tulsa massacres and et cetera, et cetera. Well, there was a similar thing in Israeli history. In the 80s, a lot of like documents were released or declassified for a small period of time. And there was a reinterpretation, a re-understanding of what happened in the founding of Israel in 1948. And I had, back when I was in my film days, I met a filmmaker named Benny Bruner who did a documentary called The Great Book Robbery, which showed that there was actually Palestinians living and had a culture and had a society, because we were always told this is a land without a people, for a people without a land. But it turns out there were people there. And so,
they call it the Nakba. What did
the Nakba, which is, for them, it's a tragedy.
Right.
And
Thanks for your name, Andrew.
they were dispossessed from their land.
Yeah.
And, so many... Gaza exists in the way that it did is because so many of those people who were dispossessed of their land throughout what was Palestine at that point were essentially ghettoized in Gaza. And so I think over the years, since I was 14 or 15, and at different times I've engaged in it more than in others because at some points you find it intractable. But I think certainly in the past couple of years, it has become, in the wake of October 7th, it has become really, I think, too hard for people to ignore. And, we have and I think people were ignoring it for a long period of time. I mean, not everyone, but
I was.
But I think a lot of people, and certainly, listen, the mainstream media does not follow. I mean, the other day, Hillary Clinton was
ask you about that.
At Miriam Adelson, who was gave Trump
$100 million,
$120, $30 million this go round.
Yeah,
at a right wing event.
Condescending
to Jews, but condescending to everyone. I mean, the idea that the reason why people's perspective on Israel has changed is simply because they've been hypnotized by TikTok is absurd. That would be like the functional equivalent of, I don't know, William McNamara saying, hey, listen, what's going on in Vietnam is is actually completely just. The problem is that now we let reporters film what's going on there.
It's also
that's
another
what has happened.
example. Another example that Sarah Horowitz, the Obama speech, she said it's so hard to talk to young Jews about Israel with a wall of carnage, a wall of children,
dead babies.
Dead babies. The same thing I thought that could be said. Somebody could say it's really difficult to talk to other Europeans about our Jewish project through walls of concentration camps. It's the same fucking thing, Sam.
It is insane.
Here, explain this to me.
By the way, it's not insane. It's not insane. It's not mental illness. It's a political program and an intelligence service inculcating it into our country. Stop acting like this is individuals making errors or having something wrong with their brain chemistry. This is a political project, and they are invading and interfering with our society, our politics, our culture. Israel is an enemy state, and we have treasonous bastards in charge of our government. That's what it is. Let's be honest.
I mean, the idea that you could actually hear yourself saying those words, like the thing that's making it hard for me to express how just what Israel is doing
is dead bodies,
is all of the dead baby, the images of the dead babies, as if they're like, wait a second. It's not just the images are representation of actual real people who have died, real babies who have died, tens of thousands of children. And it is
okay, chat. Listen, tens of thousands of children have been murdered, but Donald Trump and the State Department have announced a very important issue has been resolved. Times New Roman is the new font for the State Department. I want to say something, chat. This is the essence of modern conservatism. The essence of modern conservatism is I used Times New Roman in high school when I was writing on my papers. Therefore, that's the traditional font. And we need to go back to a time when everybody was using Times New Roman. And they think that's being conservative. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the Biden administration's shift to a sans serif font to assist people with vision issues a wasteful diversity move. Now I can't use Times New Roman without looking like I'm a right-winger. They have just politicized Times New Roman. It's not even the good one. Garamond is the better serif font anyway. Like, if you're gonna have a serif font, why are you using Times New Roman? Times New Roman sucks.
It's like a psychosis, I think.
All right, listener, two things I want to talk about. Absolutely cannot stand heavy caked on makeup. Second thing, sometimes it's so hard to buy for the women of Holocaust survivors. And I've studied World War II extensively because it just captivates you, the suffering and what happened. And I mean, I've read so many books about it. I've watched so many documentaries. It's been something that I've spent years and years studying about the Holocaust. And to find out that the state that, and you just described how it came to be, but it's supposed to promote safety and this will never happen again to anybody else, that they have now done the same thing to Palestinians that was done to them. Is that a byproduct of this Jewish supremacy, that like the rules that are, I mean, that's the part that I think is such a,
I don't think they've done the same thing. I think they've done a different thing that is horrible and unjust and cruel and inhuman and a war crime and crimes against humanity. It's not the same, but it's also, but they have, Israel has become the oppressor and has been for decades, and is engaging now in an ethnic cleansing and in a genocide that it's not the same, but it's not better. Let's put it that way. I think. I mean, I have a couple of theories about it. I mean, for me, it's very difficult as a Jew. First off,
the timeout was fair, but all that was going to do was highlight the deep anti-Semitism inherent and necessary to the Zionist project, made explicit since the days of Herzl. Well, yeah, no shit. That's a better way of putting it. And Jabotinsky. That's a better way of putting it, don't you think?
Like, I think it's important to. I think it's very, very dangerous to conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Israel or anti-Zionist perspective. I think it's very dangerous for Jews, and I think it's just a lie. I mean, it's just not true. I do think that, like, as a Jew, I personally feel a greater moral obligation to fight against it than I might other horrors that are taking place in the world, in the same way that, like, I am more activated to fight ICE in New York City than I would be in Chicago because, like, I have some close proximity or but I think it's a combination of, like, of trauma. I think it's a combination of, frankly, I would be interested if someone was to explore the idea of what happens with a lot of people who were oppressed in the Soviet Union, who were brought to Israel, and many of them end up being settlers and given land on the West Bank. I mean, I think you're coming from, like, an authoritarian society, and sometimes those lessons are hard to unlearn. And if you're in a position where you're no longer the horse, you're the rider, I think that can impact people in very, very bad ways. And so there was, were there opportunities in the course of Israel to sort of get off this path and maybe not correct reverse the colonization, but to, find a different way forward. I mean, it happened in South Africa. I think there were, but they were missed, and so it's a horror. It's a horror show. It really is. And I think, hopefully we're moving into a place where to the extent that the U.S. has leverage over Israel, which I think is quite great, actually, at this point.
And I hope
we use it.
I hope that Democratic candidates can be very clear-eyed in criticism against the Israeli government and support for Jewish people and against anti-Semitism, because both of those things.
It's easy to do. That's easy.
Very easy. And you have the groups that Hillary Clinton was with that are weaponizing anti-Semitism to silence education in universities, which actually incubates anti-Semitism.
100%.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left. We're going to play our game, Had It or Hit It.
Oh my God. Welcome to Had It or Hit It. I would hit it. Had it. Had it. I hit it every day, sometimes twice a day.
Had it or hit it. Kids' screen time.
Had it. I've had it. I'll tell you, here's the thing. My son is, like, cross platforms, and I keep apps off his phone, and then, like, but now his school is like he's doing his homework on his phone or his iPad or something, and then he's like, I just want to do Duolingo. I'm learning Navajo, and I'm like, you're learning Navajo? That's amazing. But then, is he really learning Navajo?
He got you tricked. First of all, you should learn Navajo. Every American should learn Navajo, but you should also learn Mandarin. I'm trying not to overload my brain with too much learning. I'm kind of very casually starting to learn chess at an extremely low pace, like 5 minutes a day. And from my physical sport I'm learning, I've just started to get into bowling. So I don't know that I have one more, like, lesson thing I can learn right now. White is right. Bowling a sport? Absolutely. Absolutely. Once I master bowling, I'm going to probably try to learn welding, and then I'm going to a long-term project is I want to get it back into aviation, and maybe build myself a kit plane, something like that. Who do you think you are? I am. That's exactly how I play. That's exactly how I play. Every time I fucking strike, who do you think you are? I am. Every time. Skydiving when? As soon as I find somebody else who wants to do it.
Over the line!
Huh?
I'm sorry, Smokey. You were over the line. That's a foul.
Bullshit. Mark it 8, dude.
Excuse me. Mark it 0. Next frame.
Bullshit, Walter. Mark it 8, dude.
Smokey, this is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
Hey, Walter, come on. It's just, hey, man, it's Smokey. So his toe slipped over a little, you know? It's just a game, man.
This is a league game. This determines who enters the next round robin. Am I wrong?
Yeah, but I wasn't.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, but I wasn't over. Give me the marker, dude. I'm marking an 8.
Smokey, my friend, you're entering a world of pain.
Walter, man.
You mark that frame an 8, you're entering a world of pain.
I'm not.
A world of pain.
Look, dude, this is your partner.
Is the whole world gone crazy?
Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules? Mark it 0.
They're calling the cops, man. Put the piece away.
Mark it 0.
Walter, put the piece away.
Walter?
You think I'm fucking around here? Mark it 0.
All right, it's fucking 0. You happy, you crazy fuck?
It's a league game, Smokey.
Listen, did his toe cross the line or did it not? I don't know. You know, I didn't see.
Oh, or is he just like, and so I have like 14 different ways in which I prevent him from using his devices and none of them work.
Yeah, I've fallen into that trap too, where you're grounded from your phone. Well, they only have, online school. You only have books online. And I'm just like, is that bullshit?
I know.
Yes, of
but
course
it's true.
it is.
But then I'm also, when my kids were little, I was guilty of throwing that phone in front of them just to shut them up.
I mean, I learned from my daughter. My daughter is 20, so she just sort of like, I learned what a mistake that was.
Yeah. Okay, had it or hit it, Bill Maher.
Oh, had it. I mean, Bill Maher has always been just a pompous ass. And he's a bit of a reactionary. I think he's just sort of dressed. He's always been a little bit like libertarian, and libertarians I cannot stand.
Yeah. All right. Had it or hit it, Zoran.
He is a fucking... Bill Maher is a sex creep. And all sex creeps are libertarian. Like, if somebody's like, oh, I'm a little bit libertarian, they're a creep. They're a creep. Every single time. I've never met anybody who was like, I'm a little libertarian, where it didn't turn out that they were a fucking sex creep.
Donnie.
I'll hit it. I mean, I'm very, I'm incredibly excited for Mom Donnie, what it means both for New York and what it could mean nationally.
For the Democratic Party.
For the Democratic Party and just, I think New York is going to become, I think,
Vosh said he was a libertarian socialist. Yes. And you know who the most famous self-described libertarian socialist is? Noam Chomsky. You know who Noam Chomsky is friends with? Jeffrey Epstein. Unfortunately, like, I do think that Noam Chomsky has contributed really some really good ideas, but those ideas can be found in other places. And the era of Noam Chomsky is firmly over. Overzealous describes him as a democratic socialist. I call myself a democratic socialist because that allows me to go under the radar. Because I'm concerned about the Red Scare and the fact that they're going to do another one. So I'm trying to keep myself from getting explicitly, banned from everything. You got to hide your power level a little bit. And the more I call myself a democratic socialist, the more democratic socialist politicians will have to defend me. Now, not really, but it's good cope for me. I don't think there should be democracy in the workplace, actually. I believe that we should have democratic feedback in the workplace and for the economy as a whole. But that every decision ultimately requires an executive decision. Somebody has to be empowered somewhere in order for decisions to actually be made. That's how I generally feel. How come the crypto gambling story isn't really getting much traction on social media? Probably because everybody is so tired of fighting with these people.
Much more fun place because he enjoys the city.
He's
and
cool.
He understands what makes the city great, which is that, like, you can walk. I mean, you must be experiencing this.
Every day's a great day in New York.
You walk down the street and you've seen people from countries you've never seen people from. You've interacted with people from places that you never even thought about. You've had food that like I grew up in Worcester, and it was like, ooh, you're gonna go get some Chinese food. And, like that, it's just, your life is just richer.
100%.
The diversity that the city brings. And that also has to be like socioeconomic as well, because if only rich people can live here, you don't get the art, you don't get the sort of like the artists and young comedians and painters and musicians,
culinary, restaurants,
whatever it is. They don't have the margin of error to experiment and create new things. And so I think, it's going to be a better place.
And I think it's cool. Like, he ran an impeccable campaign. He did
Amazing
such a good
politician.
job up against all of the billionaire class. He did such a great job with all of the Islamophobic attacks on him and remaining calm, never being a victim, and standing up against anti-Semitism. But what he did that was so important for me to see, that I've used a lot as we articulate to our podcast listeners when it comes to human rights, you have to link all of them. You cannot prioritize anti-Semitism as more important than Islamophobia, as more important than...
So true. In fact, I think that the preoccupation with anti-Semitism is a sign of bad faith. Because in America today, anti-Semitism, while it exists, it can be harmful, and is certainly rising on places on the far right, doesn't represent actual systemic oppression in our country. People are not being systemically oppressed for being Jewish in the same way they are for being black or an immigrant. So for me, anti-Semitism is a bigotry that we need to counter, but it doesn't affect people on near the same levels as things like misogyny. And so we have to take it seriously. We can never tolerate it. But I think a preoccupation with anti-Semitism is really just a one layer removed application of Zionism. And I do think that if people claim to be anti-Zionists, but all they do are police the pro-Palestine movement for anti-Semitism, they are not an anti-Zionist. I think if you're preoccupied with that, you are fucking weird. Now, that doesn't mean we should tolerate anti-Semitism in the pro-Palestine movement or any bigotry, but it certainly should not be, it's not a high priority issue. And it is simply one where it should be called out, it should be opposed, and people saying anti-Semitic shit should be forced to apologize and correct themselves, especially if they didn't intend it. A preoccupation with it when we live in a blatantly anti-immigrant, anti-black society is fucking weird.
And homophobia, they all have to be on the same stomping grounds, which is so unbelievable to me about Hillary Clinton. She always said women's rights are human rights, her famous saying about connecting women's rights to human rights. And then to see her on that stage yesterday, I really, for the first time, I thought I really fucking regret voting for her in 2016. I should have voted for Bernie. I should have done it. But it's a political evolution that I think people in the base are going through right now. And Pumps and I.
By the way, this is great. This is great. This is what we wanted. And by the way, I am so fucking vindicated. I've been saying that wine moms are actually a primary opportunity that we have. And so many online leftists are rebelling against their parents. So when you say, like, actually, I think wine moms would be a great source of recruitment, they push back against. Kind of an interesting point. Something to think about. White women 40 plus are going to be the vanguard. No, it's not that white women 40 plus are going to be the vanguard. It's that the reality is that women are the people who manage nonprofit in this country. It comes from, if you're going to do a Marxist analysis, women are used to doing non-compensated labor. Socially necessary, socially reproductive labor that's uncompensated. Women already bear that burden. So they're accustomed to doing it. So any movement that has any juice is going to have a bunch of women doing unpaid labor because that's our society. Our society acculturates women to do unpaid labor. So if you don't have women in your movement, you don't have middle-aged women in your movement, it's a sign that your movement is not connected to the masses. And women, so, if I go to a campaign and all I see are activists, and I don't see moms, then I know that this movement is trendy. It hasn't connected yet. But if I go to a movement and there's a debate on whether they should set up a daycare at the campaign office or the movement office, then I know that shit's on the right track. When I go into a campaign office or an issue organizing a meeting and I'm walking in and there's a bunch of toddlers chasing each other, I know that shit is fucking fire. If I walk in and it's nothing but gray heads, or I walk in and it's nothing but trendy activists, then I know that shit, the juice.
Representative of that you start evolving and you start getting more curious, because on the left, people are readers. You are curious.
Yep.
People haven't taken away your critical
Yep.
thinking. So when you see a politician trying to propagandize you, it doesn't work.
It's harder now because there's a lot of negative to social media, but there's a lot more access to information. It makes it a little more challenging to sort of wade through to find out what stuff is bullshit. But there's enough diversity where you can't corner the truth the way that it was when there was just like 3 networks.
Yes, I agree with that. I was a great MSNBC Democrat for a long time. Okay, last one. Had it or hit it, United States of America.
Well, I'd hit it. This is my home, and that doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that it's even like. I think we have a lot of improvement to do, but this is my home, and so I'd hit it, as the kids would say.
You did it, Sam. Okay.
And by the way, chat, I agree completely. If you know me, you know I'm a China glazer. Now, I don't bring these things to you because I want to leave and move to China. I bring them to you because they're evidence that they could be done here. We just have to want to do it. And I want to be proud of my country. I want my family and friends to live in a society that is improving, not devolving.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was really fun.
It's so awesome to be in person with you in New York City, obviously the greatest city in the world. And we'd love to have you back some other time.
I'd love to.
All right, Pumps, tell him.
We will see you next Tuesday and Thursday.
I'll tell you what I've had it with. Let's hear it. I've had it with that.
Listen up, patriots, gaytriots, and natriots. We have a new podcast that has dropped. It's called iHip News. It's Monday through Friday, every day.
I consider them to be such a growth indicator for the left. The fact that they're blowing the fuck up is so huge for us. And I need them to not be Gavin Newsom supporters. I need them to be behind AOC. They need somebody in their ear telling them that AOC is going to win. They need to have that irrational exuberance. Or whoever the left-wing candidate is. I'm just saying it's AOC because it's going to be AOC. As a New England Patriots fan, it's so funny hearing gaytriots in a non-sport context. Yeah, it's very funny. I think one of the worst things that happened to Hassan is he started paying attention to Editor Mentum, who has the worst political takes I've ever seen. And every time I see one of his posts, I'm just like, this guy sucks. Every single time. It's actually crazy how he has a 0% hit rate. It's actually crazy. Like, I am somebody I like to give credit where credit is due, but he has a 0% hit rate. And so it's just like, all right, now I just hate you because you're always wrong. I'm sorry, but this is demonic. Am I crazy? This looks fucking demonic. This is the good guys to people. I kind of want to watch the FD Signifier video. Is that crazy? Has anybody seen this? Has anybody watched it? Do you have anything that's not from Reuters? Because I keep getting this pop up and I don't care. U.S. threatens new ICC sanctions unless court pledges not to prosecute Trump. It's good? Fuck it. We'll watch some of it. If I feel like it's the problem, like watching really long videos, like we just watched a really long video. I think people get tired. You know what I mean? Like they want a little bit more variety. That's the problem with these really, really long videos. There's probably a 15-minute Nebula ad in it. Didn't Nebula fire a bunch of people for being anti-Zionist? Is FD Signifier a Nebula guy?
Do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Mike, you're correct to view anti-Semitism as equal of importance of all other bigotries, but to many, that is evidence to many of Jew hatred. There was literally a Times of Israel piece which was titled, "To dislike certain ethnicities is racist. To see Jews as equal is as anti-Semitic." I see Jews as equal. If you consider that anti-Semitic, you're insane.
Years.
Too many.
Now 5 is a lot, right? I'm gonna give you some credit. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
I want to watch. On April 20th, 1999, I was in my junior year of high school.
My audio is roboting. Hold on. Watch this is the original video he had before YouTube censored it.
So, do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Too many.
Now 5 is a lot, right? I'm gonna give you some credit. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
I want to watch that execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and get him be publicly executed. And I think that would be justice. At what age should you start to see public execution? But hold on a second. Don't you agree that more speech, not less speech, is better for a free society? Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact.
Now let's get it all in perspective. For all y'all enjoyment, a song y'all can step with. Y'all appointed me to bring rap justice, but I ain't 5-0, y'all know it's Nas, yo. Grey Goose and a whole lot of hydro. Only describe us as soldier survivors. Stay laced in the best, well dressed with finesse in the white tee, looking for white meat.
So if you had a daughter and she was 10 and she got raped, when she was gonna give birth and she was gonna live, would you want her to go through that and carry her with baby?
The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered.
In the days after the death of George Floyd, conservatives created the George Floyd Challenge on social media, where they took pictures of themselves mocking Floyd's last moments before his death.
And you roll with, swing around like you stupid. King of the town, yeah, I've been that. You know I click-clack where you and your men's at. Through the Smurf, through the wild baseball bat. Rooftop like we bringing 88 back. They shooting.
I don't see a goddamn thing wrong with that intro.
In math class, in the middle of what seemingly was...
I know Oni Spumoni. I'm going to message them. I need them to help me.
A normal day, and my teacher, whose name I don't quite remember, came into class late with a ghostly look on his face. He was a first-year teacher, one of the few black male teachers I think I had all through high school. He was from Colorado, so he had a bit of a Carlton Banks swag, very proper. But he settled us down and then announced that there had been a shooting at a high school in Colorado, and that our school, way in Illinois, might be dismissed soon. I didn't go to a school where I worried about safety that much. This is the South Chicago suburbs in the 90s, and don't get me wrong, gang violence was definitely a thing, even in the suburbs back then. But in my school, at worst, there were a few fights. I might have seen some gang activity once or twice. So it was weird to all of us that this shooting was significant enough in a whole state across the country that they were going to cancel school here, or that anything about our school in particular would need to change in the aftermath of the Columbine massacre. Now, understand, gang issues have been relevant to the city of Chicago for decades. I wasn't even allowed to wear a certain color combination since like 5th grade, because even in the suburbs, the gang problem was serious enough for them to pay attention. I had to learn a handshake or two to walk through my neighborhood just to get to school for a short period of time. But I didn't know any serious gangsters, right? I wasn't in the streets like that. And the streets that you would have to be in like that were not near me. But I do vividly remember stories of Yummy Sandifer, Dantrell Davis, and Girl X, horrifying stories of crime in Chicago in the 90s, but far enough away that I didn't think about it in my daily life. At the same time, it did reflect enough of my world that I understood that I was still somewhat a part of it. But I didn't fear it at school. My high school was pretty decent. It was well mixed at the time, both racially and socioeconomically. There was a handful of rougher kids in the city who went to school, but that was it. I worried more about getting roasted at the lunch table than getting chased home by GDs. But after Columbine, I suddenly had a new fear that I needed to face every day. Random, quiet, edgy white boy. Well, not super random, because one thing that came out of Columbine was that there was a certain type of young white male that was almost always behind these types of events, and they were more common at my school than any alleged thugs. See, much like the black parts feeding into the school, there were also poor white parts. And I noticed early on that the poor white kids at the school did not mix well with the ones from the nicer part of the suburbs. In fact, they were bullied incessantly by those kids. And some of those kids fit the description, if you.
And by the way, I will say this. This is why class is a great organizing principle. Because to those, and if we don't organize those poor white kids, they are the fodder of fascism. There is no doubt about it. And many successful left-wing movements have unified people across racial lines. It has happened, and it will happen.
They seemed frustrated with the world in ways that didn't make sense to me, because to me, they were still white, couldn't be that bad. Over the years, I found most of these guys on Facebook, and most of them, I would say, are living useful, healthy lives. Most of them actually have moderate to liberal politics at the end of the day. But a few of them still seem very, very angry. But these days, I kind of get it. Young men like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the perpetrators of the Columbine Massacre, they, for whatever reason, felt very similar to these boys and men, and they just decided to respond in destructive and horrifying ways. And of course, you know, they weren't the first or the last.
Students also say that members of the small suburban gang bragged about their guns and ammo. One cyber chatter even recalled a previous warning that a certain El Caress wrote about preparing for the big April 20th. You're all gonna be sorry.
The racial bribe is how conservatism and capitalism works in America. Capitalists always try to create racial dysfunction and racial disorder and racial tension. Whenever shit is getting dark, they push that button intentionally. Elon Musk is doing it intentionally, because if there is racial discord, then we will not unite and take his shit. White people are not going to be able to take Elon Musk's shit without the help of black people. We have to come together. Capitalists always do this. They always try to create racial discord. You got to learn the lessons of Mattawan, which is a great movie, chat. You got to learn the lessons of Mattawan. I want to play that clip. I'll show you. It's Matewan. I'm sorry. Matewan. I always mispronounce it. Where's this clip? Oh, no, I don't want a trailer. This will work. This shit is so good.
You want to be treated like men? You want to be treated fair? Well, you ain't men to that coal company. Your equipment, a shovel, a gondola car, a hunk of...
Not a gun in the car. It's a gondola car, but never mind. I love when people don't...
wood brace. They'll use you till you wear out, or you break down, or you're buried under a slate fall, and then they'll get a new one. And they don't care what color it is or where it comes from. It doesn't matter how much coal you can load or how long your family has lived on this land.
All right, this scene is better with James Earl Jones in it. They cut out the James Earl Jones part. All right, give me a second. The James Earl Jones part is what makes the scene. I'm sorry, but like, this is a good speech, but it only works in the context. Here's the whole clip. Thank you, fucking God. Someone found it for me. Thank you, God. And then we'll get back to the FD Signifier.
First thing we got to have is all of these niggers and all these dagos that come in here to take our jobs thrown out of the mine.
Mine's hell. They got them in our houses. They're sitting in our tables right now, and they're sleeping in our beds while we're out living under a pizza at the back of the holler.
I've been a union man my whole life. I know the story with these coal operators. The only thing they understand is the bad end of a bullet. And if we show them, just soon blow up their damn minds and seen them work by a bunch of scabs, but then they gonna listen.
It's Alex. You got someone.
They told me that CE Live is where the union men's.
What's your names?
They calls me few clothes. The men's got they told me that they was you what Joe Peckerwood. I've been called nigger, and I can't help that the way white folks is, but I ain't never been called no scab. And I ain't fixing to start up now. I go ton for ton loading coal with any man here. When I do, I expect the same dollar for the same work.
Is Holler alive?
Union men, my ass. You want to be treated like men? You want to be treated fair? Well, you ain't men to that coal company. Your equipment, a shovel, a gondola car, a hunk of wood brace. They'll use you till you wear out, or you break down, or you're buried under a slate fall, and then they'll get a new one. And they don't care what color it is or where it comes from. It doesn't matter how much coal you can load or how long your family has lived on this land. If you stand alone, you're just so much shit to those people. You think this man is your enemy? Huh? This is a worker. Any union keeps this man out. Ain't a union. It's a goddamn club. Now, they got you fighting white against colored, native against foreign, holler against holler. When you know there ain't but two sides of this world, them that work and them that don't. You work, they don't. That's all you got to know about the enemy. You say you got guns. Well, I know that you all are brave men, and I know you could shoot it out with the company if you had to. But the coal company don't want this union. The state government don't want it, the federal government don't want it, and they're all of them just waiting for an excuse to come down and crush us to nothing. Fellas, we're in a hole full of coal gas here. The tiniest spark at the wrong time is going to be the end of us. So we got to pick away at this situation.
The brain
Slow
domain.
And careful. We got to organize and build. We got to work together, till they can't get their coal out of the ground without us, because we're a union. Because we're the workers, damn it, and we take care of each other.
How can we shut the mines down if we don't dynamite?
The men walk out. All of them.
Fat chance.
And every man that walks out on his own steam, we take into the union.
All the Dagos and all the colors.
That's what a union is, fellas. You better get used to it.
Tourism experts widely know that this time of year has been extremely violent throughout history. April 19th is the anniversary of many painful moments, from Waco to Ruby Ridge to Oklahoma City. And this past April 20th was the 110th anniversary of Adolf Hitler's birthday.
April 20th might just turn out to be a watershed date for an event such as what occurred in Colorado, and might in the future precipitate other types of events like this.
In 1999, Columbine was actually the fourth school shooting to get significant media coverage in around 4 years. A few years before,
Tom like a Tom, thank you for the 20 gifties. Solidarity, everybody. Appreciate you all. The reason why I showed you that speech is because that's our real history. Warts and all. It's not to say that everybody who ever wanted to join a union didn't have bad, bigoted fucking takes. But the purpose of the union is to draw together people that might never have been together because they see they have a shared class interest. And once they're all in the union together, we can begin to heal the damage that the racial injustices have caused. And it's our responsibility to recognize that racial prejudice and bigotry don't go away because we form a union or have some sort of economic allegiance. It is part, but if we're going to overturn the systems that perpetuate it, we have to do so around a basis for which we can commonly organize, which is our class interest, the class struggle. And this is why I completely disagree with the settler, thesis of, oh no, there's no interest in common between a black coal mine worker and a white coal mine worker. They can't possibly ever work together. That's fucking insane. And that anti-Marxist attitude, it is an inversion of what Marx said. Racial oppression happened because they needed to have a hyper-exploited population so they could do primitive accumulation. The racial bribe was created. The racial caste system of America was created in order to divide the working class, the white working class from the black working class. If we're going to overturn the systems that created racism, we have to overturn that racial divide and work together.
Shot 20 students a day after murdering both his parents in Oregon. In that same year, 2 middle school students set up a...
In what is to be done, Lenin says that spontaneous working class organizing can only achieve trade union consciousness. Do you think that we have achieved even that in the U.S.? Or is it more work necessary before we convert that to socialist consciousness, or can we take a shortcut? The answer is you cannot have... What Lenin is talking about is the fact that developing trade union consciousness doesn't automatically result in communism, right? But it's a necessary condition in order for socialist progress to be made. So you can't skip over it It's just, you can't just do it and then assume that's going to lead to socialism. That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying, oh, therefore don't do trade union organizing. He said the opposite, which is socialists should go into trade unions. And that trade unions are the best place for people to learn the skills of revolution. If you're going to do a general strike, you need to know how to do a strike. How do people know how to do strikes? They do strikes in their workplace. They practice. So it's about building that class power. And then as the class increases in power and the consciousness gets to a point, and then there's a rupture and opportunity that takes place, then you can utilize those skills beyond trade union consciousness. But trade union consciousness is a necessary condition to develop class consciousness. And people are brutalizing Lenin when they're like, oh no, we shouldn't do unions because that's only trade union consciousness. No, it's the opposite. Trade unions are how you build the army.
Sniper's nest and pulled the fire alarm at Westside Middle School in Arkansas, killing a teacher and 4 middle schoolers. Sometime later, there was another shooting in Georgia, or maybe it was back in Colorado, maybe it was Illinois. Fast forward some years, and it's a guy driving a car through a college in California. It's hard to say. There's so many, and to be honest, I personally stopped counting them the way I did back in 2012 in Newton, Connecticut, because that's when I realized that no matter what happened or how many people died, nothing was ever going to be done about this problem. In 2012, Adam Lanza used a Bushmaster XM15 to kill 27 people, 7 adults and 20 elementary school age children. You would think that such an event would elicit national outrage strong enough to change gun laws in this country forever. That's what happened in other places where mass shootings occur. You would think that this nation would do some deep reflection on its engagement with guns, mental illness, and the ways young men, mostly white young men, are being socialized to make sure that something this senseless would never happen again. Surely someone would pay a price for the death of nearly 30 innocent people, mostly innocent children, innocent, mostly white children. But no, instead, it actually birthed a new conspiracy movement. People like Alex Jones made harassing the families of the victims their new content formula, so much so that he was sued into relative obscurity. And once that happened, it became clear nothing would ever be done about these types of spree shootings because it's more important to serve the interests of gun lobbyists and the ideology that represents it than to serve the people suffering from the gun violence themselves. Because
I think there's one thing, I agree with this, but I think it's also important to understand that the gun lobbyists are not just gun lobbyists. They also organized a movement. This is something that I think a lot of left liberals do not acknowledge about guns in America. The reason why America has guns the way that we do is because there's a gun culture and a gun rights movement that is extremely organized. And it plays hardball in Republican primaries. So if you ever support gun control as a Republican, you have so much shit looming over your head. It's crazy. So the NRA made the Republican Party its bitch. And it said, we're going to play hardball in Republican primaries. And so it became a place where, people that wanted to advance in politics understood you better have the gun control law or the gun lobby on your side if you want to be a right-wing politician. We need to build institutions of that kind of heft in the left. And that, that is the lesson that should be learned there. It's not just that, yes, there is a capitalist behind it, and yes, there is lobbyists, and yes, there is money, but it was more about the strategic political calculus that was formed by those groups. And there are millions of grassroots people that care deeply about gun rights. That's the reality. That is a point that I think we should acknowledge from observing our enemy. Chad, I just realized something. We are 3.5 hours into the stream, and I forgot to shill. I forgot to shill. That feels wrong in a certain type of way. To make it this long without chilling? How could I live with myself if I don't chill? I forgot to chill earlier this week, chat. And I haven't been able to forgive myself. Because the only way this stream could continue to exist is with your support. My stream only exists because people like you subscribe. I don't have ads. I don't have sponsors. Because I value my freedom to speak as an outsider and a truth teller. I don't moderate what I say because I'm worried about sponsorships. I don't moderate what I say because I'm worried about ads. I speak the truth to you as I see it, but that could only exist if you support the stream. And when you support the stream by gifting subs, there's a lot of people here working paycheck to paycheck, parents of young children, college students, people on a fixed income because of retirement or disability, people struggling to make ends meet. When you gift them a sub, you help them get access to all the amazing benefits of being a subscriber, including we are one of the channels that has Twitch Rewind. If you're a subscriber, you can go back. If you joined the stream late, you can go back and watch the earlier parts of the stream. And then you can run it at 1.25 speed and catch up, or 1.5 speed. So you can watch the whole stream and then catch up to live. So please consider supporting the stream by subscribing. It helps me grow. It boosts us in the algorithm. It makes Twitch like me and defend me more. And trust me, chat, there are people that are trying to attack me. Literally. Trying to get Congress to ban me. I'm dead serious. There are people out there that are desperately trying to get Congress to pressure Twitch about me. This is real. So, you know, the better this stream does, the more successful we are, the more Twitch is willing to stick their neck out and be like, free speech is important. So, and that's the reality. If Hassan wasn't like the third biggest streamer on Twitch, we would be in trouble. I can tell you that right now. Mad Don Doe, thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs. So, thank you so much for all the support. You guys are the best. Tom like a Tom, thank you for the 20 bomb. I should have shilled when you dropped that. Thank you, Chirp'em. Thank you, everybody. We have a hype train, the top sub gifter, the top bit donor, get the hype train conductor badge next to their name. That's a golden locomotive that becomes a purple locomotive that you get to keep forever. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my shill. Tom like a Tom, thank you for dropping a 20 bomb again. You're the best. I appreciate you. Be right back.
To them, to white America especially, it's worth it. I think it's worth it to have
a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
A source tells CNN that Trump ally and the founder of Turning Points USA, Charlie Kirk, was shot at an event on a college campus in Utah.
Kirk was actually shot in the neck. The school adding that Kirk was 20 minutes into speaking
when shots were fired from a nearby building. According to the university, there are reports that Kirk was hit.
We can hear the audio where an audience member asked Kirk about mass shooters in America right before the gunshot. An audience member says, do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years? Kirk says, counting or not counting gang violence, and that is when that single shot was fired.
It is my great dishonor to be the person that says this and breaks this to you on television, but Charlie Kirk, according to the President of the United States, is dead.
When I look at the very public, gruesome murder of Charlie Kirk, I can't help but realize that for the first time since 2012, I'm reminded of this brand of spectacle violence, somewhere between terrorism, true crime, political violence, and accelerationism. But, and here's an important part, almost always exclusively white, both in the victims, but also the perpetrators. It's actually not ideal to talk openly about the perpetrators of mass shootings. I'm gonna break some social mores in this video, among many other things. The reason why I call it spectacle violence is because for the most part, the individuals that do these horrific acts do them for attention. It's why they write manifestos and send press kits to local media. Some have even live streamed their crimes. So talking about them publicly ends up being exactly what they want, and in many ways, it motivates copycats. However, at a certain point, I feel like certain conversations need to be had, especially when some of the main people who need to hear these things are trying very hard to avoid the subject. The underlying forces behind these events, behind the murder of Charlie Kirk and even the attempted murder of Donald Trump, are things the right deeply wants to avoid, because talking about these things might force many on the right to critically engage with the ongoing struggle that the right is in with its own ideology and the tangible results that ideology leads to, which, to put simply, is rampant unnecessary death. And by rampant unnecessary death, I'm not just talking about the multiple genocides happening across the world through American imperialism, or the many preventable deaths happening because of poor healthcare or poverty in America right now. I'm genuinely just talking about normal white people that are dying or killing themselves greatly due to the ideology that the right promotes throughout this country. I believe many modern conservatives, particularly the men, are in a death cult. It's not a hot take to speak to how the party of Trump thrived.
I agree with this. I think this is the essence of fascism. It's really important. The essence of fascism is this kind of like self-annihilation. That's why they, that's why they want to fight China, because China will beat us and they'll die
on the pain and suffering of others. But today, for this video, I want to spend time on the real byproduct of that. The fact that the biggest body counts, at least here in the States, is actually other white people, and that the cult works extremely hard, often using figures like Charlie Kirk to hide this reality, or maybe make it seem like it's all worth it, as we see them do with his death in particular. I had no desire or intention to talk about Kirk because I try my best to avoid these types of headaches. But in the wake of his death, the right has tried to turn him into Martin Luther King, and Charlie Kirk directly insulted Martin Luther King's legacy.
Yeah, and the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon.
Yeah, and that's the reality.
So there's a need for some direct pushback and response in this regard. Also, I have to admit, I'm a bit fearful of the response this might get from the right. They seem to feel like this one time, nobody should disagree with their views of this guy or make fun of the fact that he died, that nobody should make jokes about a person who was overtly hateful and ugly to them. Mind you that in the days after the death of George Floyd, conservatives created the George Floyd Challenge on social media, where they took pictures of themselves mocking Floyd's last moments before his death. And to this day, they are so obsessed with mocking him that they're still keeping him alive through memes and AI. But somehow,
yeah, I saw you. I saw that you were the editor. Can I just say can you edit me some more intros like that? I would love to have intros like that on my videos. I would love to have videos of
how Charlie Kirk is where we draw the line. So
like, honestly, chat, I could watch this every day. Hold on.
So, do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Too many.
Okay, now 5 is a lot, right? I'm gonna give you some credit. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
I want to watch that execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and get him be publicly executed. And I think that would be justice. At what age should you start to see public executions? Well, hold on.
I don't know about you, chat, but I was shaking my head disapprovingly.
you guys got that one, sure. With that said, I will forewarn you, this is going to be a pretty gruesome, ugly, hard.
If you're new to my community, we have this meme that whenever you disapprove of something like I just did, you put Peepo smile in the chat. Because as my mother always said, if you have nothing nice to say, it's best to say nothing at all. So we peepo smile whenever we disapprove of that, and we're just shaking our head and going, you should have said that was in Minecraft.
Hard to watch video at times.
Read Onis. Did you miss? Okay, I don't know. Fuck, shit's getting worse in the Twitch chat. I did not edit that intro. It was the one thing I didn't edit. I am absolutely capable of that, but that was one of his other editors who wanted to remain nameless because they thought they would catch shit for it. Rosiver, thank you for the 5 tier 1s. You guys are the best. Thank you for supporting the stream.
To talk candidly and maybe even flippantly about death and self-harm and mental illness and mass murder and all the isms. While I have some hopeful things to speak to by the end, this is definitely a video that will make you feel shitty at times, because it made me feel shitty making it. But it needs to be done. It needs to be known years from now, when we finally are out of this situation, that many people saw this nonsense for what it was, and will hopefully be there to inform those who don't know any better just who Charlie Kirk was and the greater context in which he lived. Because these ugly times won't last forever, and historical record is needed lest we carelessly repeat avoidable mistakes. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk and the cult that killed him. Part 1. The origins of the culture war.
The American family, liberty, freedom, the Constitution, our history, veterans. That's what we're conserving. You are on the precipice of the most important culture war.
Hey, Aries.
Young men do not know how to control themselves. Ladies, would you agree?
I'm sorry, chat, but I've seen a Labrador Retriever control himself from a freshly cooked steak. If a Labrador Retriever could see a freshly cooked steak right in front of their little nose and sit there without doing anything, you could control yourself around other human beings, okay? Like, I'm sorry, but you are better than a dog.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to do the whole other side of this in a second, so you better be ready. You better be ready. They're like, oh, yeah. It's going to be an equal opportunity offender.
Men can't control themselves is basically the same thing as saying you think rape is acceptable. Exactly. Basically, what Charlie Kirk is saying here, in case you don't get what he's putting out here, he's saying that if a woman is wearing clothes that reveal her figure is attractive and a man assaults her, it's actually her fault and she deserves it. Because we all know men can't control themselves. Now, why would you spread that idea? You would spread that idea because you're trying to control women and you don't want women to dress scantily clad or in ways that emphasize their figure. And so you're trying to make them be conservative and say, oh, you want protection from conservative men? Well, you better be conservative or else raping you is okay. That's what it is. It is, we're going to allow men to abuse you to force you to follow my social and cultural norms, what I think is acceptable, or else. That's what it is. It is, we are going to threaten you with rape unless you do what we want.
To understand Charlie Kirk in totality, we first need to understand that he isn't the first, nor will he be the last of his kind. In fact, he's part of a long-standing tradition of right-wing provocateurs whose job is not doing politics the right way, as some dumb asshole might say on their podcast. But instead,
I don't want to sound offensive here, but Charlie Kirk was kind of a jerk. Charlie Jerk. I mean, listen. Charlie Kirk is just a long line of guys who became popular because they say annoying, offensive shit that pisses people off. And other people see that and go, ha ha, you're mad. That person got mad, based. the mentality of a 14-year-old adolescent. And the reason why people like Charlie Kirk can exist is because if you said something like that to another, like if two 14-year-old boys were in a hallway and one 14-year-old boy said something like Charlie Kirk does and the other 14-year-old boy punched them in the face, most people would go, oh, that's bad. Fighting is bad. Violence is bad. But the parents would come down, they would listen, and they would go, Charlie, if you say someone's mom's a slut, Charlie, and somebody punches you in the face, well, you shouldn't insult their mother. Now, you should not punch someone in the face. That's wrong, and you should punish the child. But there is some parenting that goes on, right? There's parenting that goes on. If you say really offensive stuff to people, they might lash out. But you should also control yourself. Lashing out and getting violent is wrong. So you parent the people and turn them into functional human beings. Well, people like Charlie Kirk, they leave middle school and they never grow up.
Was furthering a far-right agenda in this country, and this is apparent in just how far the right has been able to shift the Overton window in terms of what are even acceptable things to say or believe in our modern society. For example, no American would have supported or even seriously engaged with the idea of a president getting a third term ever since FDR did it nearly 75 years ago. It's literally in the Constitution. However, for weeks now, as of recording, Republicans, even Republican officials, have been seriously priming Americans for the argument that Trump should get a third term and how that's actually okay under the Constitution.
We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president.
Or is it constitutional for President Trump to run for a third term? He's teasing that.
You know, if you read the Constitution, it says it's not, but if he says he has some different circumstances that might be able to go around the Constitution, but that's up to him. We got a long way to go.
But you're open to it.
Well, I think that there's going to have to be an evaluation.
Not even George W. Bush, who was very, very bad. The fact that he's the last Republican president before Trump has managed to whitewash his past. He was not good. Don't let the old painting sad man stuff fool you. But as bad as he was, he never would have thought of sending troops in the military and the National Guard to American cities and states that he didn't like. But Trump is threatening to send American troops to low-crime cities like Portland, stating that they need to be cleaned up, ignoring the much more dangerous cities in red states. And the right eats this all up. Mind you, and this will be a recurring theme, none of this is really helping anyone, let alone many of the working-class white people who voted for Trump. While Trump's appeal is more diverse than people like to believe, this is just something you have to acknowledge. At the end of the day, his base, like all Republicans for years, has been among uneducated whites and rural white people. People who, for the most part, have never benefited from his policies. For example, regarding the ongoing government shutdown that is still in place as of writing, the shutdown is happening because Republicans want to make major cuts to many social safety net programs, which will impact poorer Americans. And despite the efforts of Republicans for decades to make it seem like the poor are only undeserving black and brown people leeching off the government, the majority of Americans receiving those benefits are white. And these same white people will support Trump literally to their death. Why is this the case? And what does it have to do with Charlie Kirk? To make sense of that, I want to dive into the concept of the culture war, because it's through the culture war that all of this is possible. And they know this because Charlie Kirk actually named his college tour the Culture War Tour. So switching gears for a second, if you're at all on Twitter and social media in the months and weeks preceding the...
I think one of the things about the culture war is that what exactly do they want? It's not firmly stated. Like, the thing about the conservatives in general is they don't really have a project. They just try to find individuals that are weird to them, right? That people that, you know, people that are uncharismatic, people that are weird, people that are somebody that you might cringe at. And they go, oh, look at that. That's bad. Doesn't that make you feel bad? But they don't have a constructive project. And the moment you start asking them what their constructive project is, 70% of people are like, ew, ew, that sucks. Boo, boo, we hate that. Boo. So the only way the right wing can win is in relation to some caricature they've created. The moment you start asking them to build something, everybody hates it.
Murder of Charlie Kirk, you probably caught wind of two other tragic killings. The killings of Austin Metcalf and Irina Zarutska both went viral on Twitter as these were two young white lives ended by black men. Both of those black men, mind you, faced immediate legal charges. I want to be clear. It's genuinely sad, and I send condolences to their families regardless of the circumstances of their death. It's tragic when people die like this, especially when their deaths have become flashpoints in culture wars online. Austin Metcalf's father in particular showed an inspirational level of grace in the aftermath of his son's death that should be commended. Unfortunately,
because the motivated fascists want blood and soil, but America is you can't have a blood and soil movement in America. It's incoherent. It's incoherent. What church? Christianity doesn't mean anything. There are Christian sects who believe completely different things on every major theological point. So if you say, I'm organizing around Christianity, what does that Christianity even mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it is an empty signifier. When you say we want to have a white society, what the fuck is white? Is Nick Fuentes white? And when you say white society, what does that mean? There's no content to their, it is all, it's like it's as close to it as the idea as somebody farting in the library. That is it. It stinks. You're standing around ideas, but it's not actually an idea that is articulable. But it's like, well, it's kind of the vibe of an idea.
Unfortunately, that father's grace is not being copied by the American right, who used his son's death to talk about black fatigue. Not the original use of that term, by the way, but a racist version that is basically white people getting tired of not being able to be openly racist. Similarly, Zarutska's death spurred legislative initiatives to reinstate and even expedite the death penalty in North Carolina, which, yikes, is really all I can say to that. And this is all after President Trump weaponized the deaths of white women at the hands.
It was the result of having multiple pastors tell me essentially the same story about quoting the Sermon on the Mount, parenthetically, in their preaching, turn the other cheek, and have someone come up to say, where did you get those liberal talking points? And what was alarming to me was that in most of those scenarios where the pastor would say, I'm literally quoting Jesus Christ, the response would not be, I apologize. The response would be, yes, but that doesn't work. Right, because conservatives do not consider Christianity to be rules of behavior or a moral philosophy or even religious practice. It is a label to differentiate us versus them. They don't care about Jesus Christ, the Son of God, or the moral teacher, or even the historical figure. They think of Jesus Christ as a label that tells them who they are. It doesn't mean anything to them. Just like American doesn't really mean anything to them. That's why they're so comfortable moving around who gets to be American. Because to them, you could only be American if you are in their group. So they're very comfortable with stripping American status from other people who are not in their group. They want to whittle down what it means to be American to be someone who agrees with them completely. And what is agree with what? There isn't anything there. That's the point. It allows a pragmatic, and I'm using the term very selectively, opportunistic scumbag to gain power. But when you actually reach through the mists and try to find something, there's nothing there. When you open the curtain, there's just an old guy operating levers. There's no Wizard of Oz. There is no fucking idea that these guys believe in. They believe in fucking nothing. It's just a vibe that people like them will benefit. That's it. That's it. One of the best Christian bombs was that best analogy to modern Christianity is Satanism, laundering theology for the purpose of self-gratification. I mean, there's a reason why conservatism largely, the modern conservative movement largely sprung from evangelical Protestantism of the Deep South. That's where the religious entrepreneurs are. That's where the scam artists, the tent revivalists, the spirit healers, the snake handlers, the scum. That's why modern Christianity, the conservative movement, is the garb of a fraudster.
Of immigrants all through his campaign trail as a way to bolster his anti-immigrant agenda. And now we have ICE kidnapping people off the street and even in churches, gyms, and public schools.
I want you to take a look at something that just came about 2 days ago. Tape of a great mother who is
tonight accused of killing a 12-year-old girl.
Police say these men strangled her before dumping her into that creek. Both men were in the country illegally.
There are hundreds and even thousands of cases like that, and it's people coming into this country that are horrible people.
And as I saw these stories explode online and invigorate an already foaming at the mouth population of racist conservatives, I couldn't help but think to myself, but what about white-on-white crime? What about Vincent Bolletaro, the young Charlie Kirk fan who murdered 2 teenage girls whom he had been stalking for what seemed like months, even after getting a restraining order against them? By the way, Bolletaro's family is connected to law enforcement, but clearly they're very picky about who they need to protect and serve. Or what about insert countless other stories of white women murdered by white men since the beginning of time? Gabby Petito, Lacey Peterson, Natalie Holloway, the little girl that John Benet Ramsey. I've been seeing that girl's face since I was a child. It's actually cursed. Surely other young white women have been murdered in North Carolina. Were their deaths not worthy of attempting to reinstate the death penalty? What is it about DeCarlos Brown, the severely mentally ill black man that killed Ariana, that warrants such a response? Do you think that black men are the most pressing danger to white women in this country? If you do, it's probably because you're racist and low-key sexist, but I know I only have so much room with y'all right now. You can bet money, like literally, don't make this bet because you'll lose it, that if a young white woman is murdered in North Carolina, it will probably be from her white boyfriend or husband. Because all crime in this country is intraracial. At least 80% of white victims of violent crime, the perpetrator of that violence is also white. White people make up 74% of familial violence victims, meaning child abuse, domestic violence, and familicide, which makes sense because most family violence offenders are white. And females make up 80% of the victims for family violence, again, usually killed by a boyfriend or husband, very rarely a stranger. And considering that only around 10% of black men have a white spouse, the biggest threat to any white woman in this country by far is a straight white man. And that goes not just for murder, but also assault and especially rape and molestation. Yet somehow new laws form when a black man is the perpetrator, as if it's the right of white men to abuse, harm, and kill women that look like them. And it doesn't require new laws for putting convicts to death when they do it. And don't get me wrong, the rate of intimate partner violence in the black community is awful in so many ways, but don't all lives matter, y'all? Surely we shouldn't only focus on black people in this situation, not if what we actually care about are these innocent white lies. And isn't this kind of gross? Is this what y'all watch me for? Some of y'all, that's what y'all want out of me. Ugh. I hate it. I hate y'all so much. Sure, when you go low, going lower is a thing, but at the end of the day, bringing up white crime statistics in this way should just really make you feel icky. It's too much like the stuff they do, you know? Further, it's not like any racist in the audience will suddenly be convinced to rethink their ways based on this information. And I'll come back to this in a moment, but this is not how actual minds are changed in reality.
All right, I'm actually going to disagree with him. One of the biggest problems the left has had, and maybe it's not a problem for him, but one of the biggest problems the left has had is they adopt the posture of capitulator or compromiser. People, third parties, people that are just getting interested in political conversations, They see the left out there going, well, please don't do that, sir, please. Oh, and it puts the right wing in the position of dominant, the position of leader, the position of questioner. And I actually think this kind of argument is about stealing up the left. I don't know if you've ever watched somebody like Vosh talk about racism, but he's like, well, yes, the statistics are true. Black people do commit slightly more crime than their demographic base, but I have an explanation for it. And he does this kind of, and it's very weak. It's very weak. This kind of argument is actually very useful because constantly being on the defense and excusing as opposed to leaning forward and saying, actually, white men are a crime problem in this country, which is objectively true. But saying that to white people shakes them a bit. They go, wait a minute, you're right, they are. Maybe we should approach these issues with a little bit more nuance and complexity, which is what we're trying to get them to do. And the other thing is, the left being much more confident in their arguments and aggressive is a good idea. So it doesn't make me feel icky at all to point out that white men are a threat.
If racism or any other ism were an issue of logic and information, would have solved that issue years ago. But it's very clear after literal generations of learning and educating that no amount of explaining the truth to racists changes the way they see things. Racism's power to endure for so long in this country isn't due to hate. I hate that we talk about
that's true. He's right.
Racism as an issue of hate, because that allows for so many people, so many very racist people, to create distance from themselves and the actual damage they do with their racism, because they don't necessarily feel hatred in their hearts when they do it, and they're probably correct. Racism isn't about hate. It's about indifference to harm being done to people that don't look like you.
So right. He's so good. I'm such a big FD Signifier fan. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's really good.
Especially if that harm is useful for how you maintain your own status quo. Racism is still here because it has utility as an organizing social framework for white Americans. The role racism plays in this country is for building consensus in community. It's almost ritualistic in its use.
I'm a Western chauvinist. And I refuse to apologize.
By the way, chat, Western is DEI. White is DEI. It is a way for British people to claim the democratic legacy of Greece, or the philosophic musings of Plato, or the marble empire of Rome. British people were wiping their ass with their bare hand when Romans were living, when the average Roman was taking baths in a heated marble pools. Do you understand? Germans were fucking their cousins and eating each other, wearing bear skins, while Greeks were discussing philosophy. White is DEI. Western is DEI. These are attempts by people that are not of a culture to claim credit for that culture as a way of excluding others. And for until very recently, a Portuguese person and a Spaniard being called the same thing would get you punched because they don't see themselves as the same. So, I mean, that's why you have Nick Fuentes and Enrico Tarrio leading the fucking white supremacy in America, because it's fucking DEI. It's to create a movement big enough. That's all it is. Irish people didn't used to be white. You all heard that a million times, but they changed the definition of white to include Irish people because they needed them to get closer to a majority.
White youth for a generation have made racist jokes, not as an expression of hate, but almost as an initiation into whiteness as a concept, performing the agreement amongst each other that blackness is beneath them and unworthy of sanctity. This is why racist group chats.
I think he's right. I think he's right about the political dimension, but the reason why most people do these things is because they're considered transgressive. Like, there is this kind of diversity, cultural hegemony where we all kind of agree in this, like, the color blindness of the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, and so and we were all taught to value each other in kindergarten. So for a teenage boy to be transgressive, to be shocking, is to reject that 90s colorblindism and try to act like you're some sort of big fucking, I'm such a man, I'm such a big boy, I could show you how transgressive I'll be. It's adolescent rebellion against, and an attempt to, you know, be noticed because you're being obnoxious. It's like when I would give my sister a wet willy. You know, it is that is the behavior you're looking at when somebody says the N-word or the F slur in an online video game. It's adolescent boy shit. It's a rootless act of rebellion against what they were taught to do. And it's to shock you. And none of it is shocking. It's kind of banal and boring.
Exists so prominently, such as the one the young Republicans got caught on earlier this year. This is why white kids on Omegle and other chat random sites and Call of Duty lobbies hurl slurs from the safety of their perceived anonymity, going all the way back to slavery. This is why poor whites had astoundingly low standards of living, but fought for the Confederacy because it preserved their way of life, as wretched as that way of life was. The lynchings of black people during slavery going into Jim Crow.
By the way, not to interrupt his flow, which is great, but let me just say, there were a lot of whites who didn't support it. And most of the whites in the South who did not support slavery were poor. Like the base of support for slavery came from economic wealth.
Was often a community gathering or festival environment for white people. They would make flyers and sell food as they watched black bodies burn and hang from the poplar trees. Then afterwards, some would even take their body parts as souvenirs. Feel free to Google this. I am not making this up. The biggest falsehood about racism is that it's about the hatred of any group of people. But in reality, racism is about a perverse love for whiteness and the love language through which that is expressed. And this is just the overt stuff that whites will admit you shouldn't do. We shouldn't lynch people. We shouldn't say the N-word. They keep doing it and saying it's a joke, but they know they shouldn't. And the reason why that is still such a focus because it serves as the cover for the much more harmful systemic racism that most whites, including Charlie Kirk, would never even admit exists.
There is nothing fascistic about deporting people in your country that are here illegally, securing your borders, and putting your own people first. How many of you students out there feel as if you'd be graded differently if you come out as a conservative or a Trump supporter? Raise your hand. Look around. That's fascism. That is definitional fascism.
Do you think?
He's so dumb. Oh, he was so dumb. He was so dumb. First of all, what is people? What people? Again, it's mysterious.
For all that I just said, do you think a few cherry-picked statistics and some witty clapbacks is going to change this? No.
Next couple of days.
This is the culture war.
And busy schedule to meet with us, the grassroots. We're fighting on college campuses every single day. We're fighting for the next generation. And to know that we have the backing of the most successful president of our generation means the world. Because look, we are in a culture war right now. We're fighting for free speech, for free markets, and for American exceptionalism. And to have the president take time out of his schedule to meet with us, to just exchange some ideas really, really means the world. And look, this is a battle that we're going to win.
And beyond that, we spoke about the black community and black issues.
I can't stress enough how important culture wars are to the American right and to American politics in general. And this is because culture wars have effectively replaced actual.
We're called a cub or a kit.
I was like, what is that noise? What is that noise that he's playing? I think I found it, chat. I think I found it.
Politics for most people, right?
Nobody guess. If you guess, you're gonna get banned like James Waite. James Waite guessed yesterday and he took a week ban. Don't try to guess.
Left.
If you think I'm kidding.
Specifically for the right, it has been instrumental in convincing many people to vote against their best interests. When regular people are serving about policy.
By the way, I wanted to say this. James Waite reached out to me with an apology. And he is going to remain banned for the time being. So I just want you to know that James Waite immediately apologized to the community and to me, but he's remaining banned. If I decide to come back and take a look at it, we will go over the apology publicly. He was one of our Chinese chatters. Said a dumb thing about he used a term he didn't understand properly. So he's eating a ban. One of our Chinese chatters used a slur. So he got banned for a week. At least he's white Chinese. Yes, he's white Chinese. Correct. So our white Chinese chatter got banned. And that's what happens. I didn't know the F slur was taboo. You don't know that word is a slur? Are you okay? Can someone give me a sub so I can watch the VOD? I hope someone does. Anyway, let's keep going.
They almost always lean toward more progressive policies, more taxing the rich, less government in people's personal lives, sensible gun control laws, etc. It's not universal. Many Americans support tougher border laws, for example, but very few desire to see what's actually been happening under Trump since he's been elected. Even attitudes on abortion rights consistently fall to the left of Republican policies. Conservative voters constantly vote against their self-interest, whether they realize it or not. And even in
okay, so when we say conservative voters vote against their self-interest, what we're saying is, expressed in policy preferences, they vote for a party that does not agree with them on major policy issues. So why do people do that? I mean, me voting for a Democratic president is the same. So why do people vote for that?
Moments where they do realize it, they still don't care because, as I've been saying, this is a cult, and the culture wars are their, deep lore text. The culture wars, ironically, are proof that facts actually should care about feelings because people have been using feelings to override facts in this country for 100+ years. There's so many examples of this, both historical and recent. One is that conservatives are more likely to die from COVID due to vaccine hesitancy and resistance to masking. Despite the fact that science, logic, and so much information was telling them that masking and vaccines would save their lives, so many conservatives were literally, like, I remember vividly, I'll see if I can find the clip, a guy that was on a respirator talking about how he doesn't regret not getting a vaccine or masking, and then he died 2 days later.
I immediately asked, why hadn't he gotten the vaccine?
I'm more of a libertarian than what we're being told.
I remember when we watched this, when it actually happened, and we still have, if you go in my Discord chat, my Discord has a really amazing soundboard that has been curated over the years, and
Graham died alone.
Then die. What do we do, argue with you? I'm not on the debate team.
What I have to do. I'm still not completely 100% sold on the inoculation.
It was eerie to hear Christopher insist on his individual freedoms, even as he struggled to.
You think I probably should have had a little healthier fear that it need to be taken more seriously? And
this is literally a man on his deathbed in denial. Like I don't know what else to say. I will tell you, my heart is hard. My heart is hard. It is hard. I look at this and I say, you are an adult man at this point. And people tried their hardest to tell you, please take this free vaccine. And you said no. And here you are on your deathbed when you have the opportunity to save other lives and say, hey, I didn't listen and it was stupid. Get the vaccine. You could end up like me. And you were there going, I'm not sold. My heart is hard. I feel no pity at that point.
I don't know how close I am to being a lot worse. I really don't know.
Christopher Green died 9 days after this interview. He was 53 years old.
It doesn't take much to find countless examples of conservatives directly being hurt by Trump's policies on tariffs or ICE crackdowns, people's mail order brides being deported, and it's often people who voted for him. And whether or not they regret it is up for grabs. But understand, pointing this out about Trump is low-hanging fruit because it's been everyone since the beginning of time in this country, especially when it comes to conservative ideology. For example,
I have to say that I disagree with people on this. I'm going to say this. I disagree with people on this. There's a lot of people that are just nice people and they want to believe that being a little mean is actually bad. And you know what? I like that you're like this, man. I like that you believe this. I like that you don't agree with being mean, but you're just wrong. I'm sorry. Negative shit works. I'm sorry. Putting some fear into the right is how you move them. They're motivated by fear. The main reason that right-wingers feel strong is they don't feel any threat. When they feel threat, they cave. And you're just not correct on this one. And if you think the left has been mean to the right, you're wrong. We have been bending over backwards for them. In fact, the reason why Trump's falling off is because people are pissed at him. And people are being mean to him. And they're not intimidated by him. And so people getting their comeuppance and us laughing at them is worthwhile. Now, I also believe we should have a handout to help them change. I'm I'm not an inquisitor. I'm not here to lash people. But when a conservative fucking dies because they refused to get a vaccine that was free and readily available, I think it absolutely should be part of our movement that person is mocked. And you can call me heartless and I will take that fucking title. But if you do evil shit and you get comeuppance, we should laugh at you. If you vote for Trump because you hate the damn immigrants and he deports your fucking spouse, I feel for your family, but I will laugh at you. And I will do that not because I'm getting sadistic relief or whatever. I'm not doing it for personal pleasure. I'm doing it because you're an example to the other dumb rubes. And every single time we could show a conservative getting mugged by reality and suffering the consequences of their actions, the better. I want everybody to know the conservative movement does not make special exceptions for you, dummy. They're coming for you too, asshole. You think they do. That's an invention of your own head. They will deport your fucking wife. You will die alone in a fucking hospital bed. They will evict you from your house for a landlord. If you're a conservative, that is something you invented in your head. There is no solidarity among the right. They don't believe in it. The only place you're going to get solidarity is with us on the left. Just so happen we're more fun too. Part of that fun is laughing at you. But I don't think conservatives are stupid. I think they are opportunistic, and I think they're greedy, and I think they're fear-filled. That's different than being stupid.
Consider free healthcare, something that the rest of the developed world has had for more than half a century, and it should and would be here in America if not for the utilization of culture wars. Numerous American presidents from a variety of political standpoints, going back to the early take much to find countless examples of conservatives directly being hurt by Trump's policies on tariffs or ICE crackdowns, people's mail order brides.
I love FD Signifier. I think FD Signifier, like, he consistently puts out really good content. He really does. I don't agree with him on everything. I can't really remember the last time. I guess, you know, see what we're like, this is the nature of our disagreement. Like, I think he's one of the, like, he's a lefty because he's a nice person. I'm not a lefty because I'm a nice person. I am a nice person, but it's not why I'm a lefty. I'm a lefty because of my evaluation and experience with class consciousness and the reality. Me being a nice person is what I choose to be, but it's not, I'm not like pulled to become a leftist because in my heart, I love everyone or something. No, that's not why I'm a leftist. I'm a lefty because I'm kind, not nice. Yes, I believe in helping people, but I don't have to like them.
And deported, and it's often people who voted for him, and whether or not they regret it.
My vibes are bad. Like, my vibes aren't bad. I think you typoed. No, what I'm trying to say is the left needs more mean people. Like, literally. Now, who we're mean to is what makes us left. I want to be mean towards the hegemonic white capitalist state and its supporters, right? Like, I never want to be mean to anybody who's marginalized. I want to take my anger and rage and focus it on the oppressors. And how can you not be mad? Every single day when I'm outside and I see a person struggling, it pisses me the fuck off. Every single time I walk past the street and it stinks like piss, that pisses me off. Every single time I walk past a place where there should be vegetation or a tree and it's dead and dirty dust with trash mixed in, pisses me the fuck off. Every single time I'm on the highway and it's gridlocked, that pisses me off. Traffic is not inevitable. Every single time I pay my rent and it's twice what it should be, it pisses me the fuck off.
For grabs. But understand, pointing this out about Trump is low-hanging fruit because it's been everyone since the beginning of time in this country, especially when it comes to conservative ideology. For example, consider free healthcare, something that the rest of the developed world has had for more than half a century, and it should and would be here in America if not for the utilization of culture wars. Numerous American presidents from a variety of political standpoints, going back to the early 1900s, have tried to create a universal healthcare system that was free to Americans, but were stymied by capitalistic and conservative entities using emotionally manipulative culture war methods of convincing the masses that having free healthcare was somehow not in their best interest.
President Truman was reelected largely on a campaign for a single-payer national health plan, and the Democratic Party gained control of Congress. At the same time, Americans were on edge after World War II, and a lot of that fear was placed broadly on the construct of communism. This fear towards communism and communists, which infested the world through the Cold War, became known as the Red Scare. Opponents of the WMD healthcare bill took advantage of these fears to squander its success. The AMA was one of these opponents, and with help from public relations firm Whitaker and Baxter, launched one of the largest lobbying efforts of its time. The group spent over $4.5 million, $48 million in today's dollars, on advertisements, newspapers, magazines, letters, and radio stations across the country. Slogans played on communist fears with titles such as "A Threat to Health" and "A Threat to Freedom," and utilized the term "socialized medicine" whenever possible. Public opinion.
By the way, chat, the only reason that this exists is because the Democratic Party played into this socialist, anti-socialist, anti-communist shit under Truman. The right-wing Democrats played into the, oh, communists are evil, we must fight them everywhere. Oh, and then they were like, oh, but now people are opposed to my social democratic programs. Wow. What?
In support of government health insurance fell from 74% in 1942 to 51% by 1949, just a year after President Truman was voted into office.
The same thing happened with the New Deal back in the 1930s. Was the New Deal the 1930s? Am I tripping?
Yes, it was the 1930s. I wish people knew about the New Deal. I wish people knew more about the New Deal. I really do. It's so funny because the people that who posture as radical leftists and who they just don't know what the New Deal was, and that always bothers me when people don't know what the New Deal is, what happened.
Don't make fun of me. The New Deal was at its core a socialist work program that lifted millions of Americans into the middle class out of poverty. But it only passed because it was initially designed to exclude undeserving Black Americans as much as possible. However, after political wins for Black people, such as the Civil Rights Bill, fair housing laws, etc.
I would honestly say that is not true. I would say that it excluded certain types of agricultural workers and domestic workers that were overwhelmingly Black populations, but the New Deal itself contained a lot of programs that directly helped Black people. There were the New Deal was designed around Dixiecrat objections. That is, there were Dixiecrat objections. To say that it completely excluded Black people is just ahistorical and not correct. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because it led to a surge of Black people joining the Democratic Party. Before FDR, Black people supported the Republican Party at like 85%. After FDR, it was 60% Democrat. FDR created programs and it massively uplifted a lot of Black workers and Black communities. And FDR's vice president and his wife were open supporters of racial equality and civil rights. So the idea that like FDR was not, and his administration were not part of this struggle is just kind of like, again, ahistorical. And kind of the reason why this idea got spread a lot is the Koch brothers did it. Just so you know, the origin of the idea that FDR is the racist New Deal and internment camps, that was spread by the Koch brothers. Like literally, that was a propaganda. There was a big effort to undermine the New Deal. And they supported a bunch of books. One of them was called like The Forgotten Man. There was another book, just basically try to go after FDR using like kind of like libertarian woke. Like, there was some discrimination, and it was all supported by the Koch brothers in an effort to dismantle more and more of the New Deal. Internment camps were real, but they weren't part of the New Deal. The internment camps were in World War II. That's not the New Deal. That's World War II. It's not the New Deal. And by the way, I'm not saying that, by the way, I'm not in any way attacking FD Signifier. I'm just talking about the history of certain types of arguments. And you should probably know the sources of arguments and where they come from so you can evaluate whether or not they're coming from a biased source and be a little bit more skeptical of them as opposed to just adopting them because you want to demonstrate that you know about certain elements of the New Deal and the Democratic Coalition in the 30s that were racist. Everybody, like, you know what I mean? And the reason why people talk about the New Deal is not because of racist compromises that were made against domestic workers or agricultural workers. They talk about the New Deal because of all the progressive shit that were in it. And I don't think you know what that is. The white man is telling us how not racist the 1930s federal government was. Honestly, I'm good. I'm good.
This required New Deal government programs to be more accessible to all Americans. And you see white Americans quickly turn against the very policies that induced the golden age of American prosperity in the 1950s and 60s. Even today, the very idea that people should get free healthcare is somehow controversial and un-American, even as millions of white Americans.
Imagine this being your only chat in my chat. Imagine this being your only chat in my chat. Not today, CIA. I think that if you listen to what I was saying, the last thing you would say is Mike was saying that the government in the 30s in America was not racist. That's not what I'm saying. What we're talking about is when people bring up the New Deal, they're talking about programs that uplifted our society and how it was done. I was never saying that the New Deal, that FDR never did anything racist or that internment camps were not a horrible crime against humanity that America did. But there's a reason why there's a reason why the internment camp stuff is brought up a lot, but Operation WB isn't brought up that much because there's a lot of Koch brother money in trying to damage FDR's reputation because they're trying to dismantle the New Deal. And I think being a useful idiot for the Koch brothers is probably a bad idea. And you should probably have an understanding of what was actually going on in the politics of the 30s and 40s. That follower was a Zach Rahr follower. Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Suffer and go broke due to healthcare costs. A fun fact to never forget is that white people poured cement.
It's also completely accurate to say black people were largely excluded from a lot of the benefits. No, that's actually historically inaccurate. That's actually historically inaccurate. There was a lot of benefits and a lot of programs, and many of them did exclude disproportionately black populations because of the way they were crafted. And there were programs like, for example, that ended up developing later, especially in the 50s, that excluded black people. So you gotta, this is the ship of Theseus happening again. This is the ship of Theseus again. People that have not done the reading, listening to somebody say a sentence, and then they don't understand what they're talking about, and then they make they change it to something that it's not what the person originally was saying, and it's like, oh no, oh no. This is a major problem of the online left. The illiteracy is crazy. Forgive chat for not having done the reading. No, it's okay if you never did the reading, but it's another thing to be like, I know what the New Deal is. It was racist. That's crazy. Everyone who disagrees with Mike is illiterate. Take a week off. I want to heavily disagree with Mike, but I don't know. I know I haven't done the reading, so I'm going to trust you with this, but it definitely doesn't feel like that's the case for where I sit. Do you understand that I'm explaining to you why you feel the way you do? There is a large amount of money from the Koch brothers to attack the New Deal as racist. Do you not get this? You understand that you are being tricked. Oh no, wait, they don't let me get this. I can't read this anymore? I can't read this article? What the fuck? I love how everything is now trying to be gatekept between like fucking subscriptions. It's like, why are you so offended that like when I bring out the one of the things that I'm actually really curious about this. Why do people get offended when they find out that some of the propaganda they believed is funded by the right wing? It's weird. It's like, I'm telling you something that's interesting and you start going like, Mike is saying everybody who disagrees with him is is illiterate. And I'm just like, no, you got tricked. I think there's an article that you should definitely read. Gray asked Ocasio-Cortez how she thought progressive politicians should be trying to build support for broad social welfare programs, giving the emergent narrative that these kind of New Deal-style universalist programs are not for diverse communities. The New Deal was an extremely economically racist policy that drew literal red lines around black and brown communities, basically invested in white America. What it did was it allowed white Americans to have access to home loans the black and brown Americans did not have access to, giving them the largest form of intergenerational wealth, which is real estate. So this has really accelerated many parts of it are already horrific racial wealth gap that continues to persist today. So how do we turn this around? Pressing beyond the critique of insufficient universalism and federal welfare policies, Ocasio-Cortez instead pointed to an explicit conscious commitment to writing racism into the housing policies in the New Deal era. When she shifted the discussion to her signature policy effort, the Green New Deal, AOC claimed that she and her allies were seeking to avoid what she saw as the pitfalls of the program's namesake. As Gray recognized, this emergent narrative has become an increasingly common refrain. In liberal and progressive politics and intellectual circles, even proponents of an expansive and universal welfare state like Gray and AOC really hold that the primary failure of the New Deal state was its inability to reach and benefit African Americans and other minorities. Rothstein's formulation has become common in liberal progressive politics. The federal government's failure to directly challenge the system of Jim Crow segregation during the New Deal period further entrenched institutional racism and exacerbated the effects of segregation and discriminations. While both versions of these narratives have been employed in current progressive political discourse, they can be traced back to debates that emerged 50 years ago. And this is what I'm trying to understand, is to let you know that the idea that the New Deal wasn't sufficiently broad and excluded communities, especially because of certain things for like domestic workers and agricultural workers, I completely agree with that. But the idea that this is the New Deal is X, Y, and Z thing is a way of getting people to condemn universalist ideas. This narrative eclipsed a second set of claims by political scientists like Michael Brown in his 1999 book, Race, Money, and the American Welfare State. Brown emphasizes that the welfare state crafted by the New Deal policy produced a truncated universalism that extended some, but not all, social rights to African Americans in ways that were not solely the result of policymakers' racial preferences. In contrast to other accounts, Brown's evidence indicates that, especially in the early phase of New Deal policymaking, African Americans were the disproportionate beneficiaries of broader universal-style welfare programs. Brown cautions that assuming racial exclusion was the sole problem confronting African American families risks oversimplifying the problem. Brown's account aligns with economist historians Lee Eldelson and Geoffrey Fier, who argue that Southern lawmakers' opposition to the New Deal was rooted in their initial resistance to a federally mandated and administered welfare state and federal labor regulations, which threatened the core of the South's paternalistic economic system. These accounts attempt to explain racial bifurcation and inequalities of the welfare state as the effects of New Deal policies, but they find that the racial intent was not the core or primary driver of these policy decisions. Especially in Brown's account, they underscore that the most universalistic programs were the most inclusive, a critical point for today's debate. What I'm trying to explain to you, chat, is that history is complicated. History is complicated, and you should not be taking in these like simplistic narratives. And when you take these simplistic narratives, they often have an motivation behind them. And this is what I'm talking about. Book review: The New Deal's War on the Bill of Rights, the untold story of FDR's concentration camps, censorship, and mass surveillance. This is directly from the Cato Institute, which is the Koch brothers' far-right propaganda. Like this is what's been going on for decades. And it's not because the Cato Institute wants to make sure that universal programs are shared by all. It's they want to discredit any kind of historical movement that we can look to for universal programs. And it's like, I think people don't understand the size and scope of the New Deal. They don't understand 14 million people got jobs. They don't understand that it funded artists and writers and folklorists, and they got first-person slave narratives. They went to the South and they met with African Americans who had lived as slaves and recorded their testimonials about what life was like under slavery. It's one of the most important pieces, historical first-person accounts of the institution of slavery that we still have to this day. They ended malaria and yellow fever in the United States. I mean, it was just the level of change that we saw. It's just, and it's not to say the New Deal didn't have all these problematic elements, but when you just talk like a TikToker, it's not good. You got to have a higher standard for yourself.
Into their own swimming pools to ensure that black people could not swim with them. Conservative political positions are positions to maintain systems of dominance and exclusion, even if those most dominated and excluded are white people, all cloaked in the rhetoric of personal responsibility. Charlie Kirk himself railed against the idea that the government might offer free lunches to school children, claiming that the problem with school children was obesity and not food insecurity.
Do you think that
there's hella people in this chat being more nuanced? No, I know. I was just talking about a specific type of person. I wasn't talking about my chat. I think everybody here understands that FDR was a very flawed individual and that obviously they didn't solve racial problems in the 30s.
Why? Of course not. Because parents should feed their kids, not the government.
What if they can't?
Go get a job. Show me a single child in America going hungry. Doesn't exist. Number two, we have churches, we have food shelters, we have billions, and it does not exist. We have a child obesity problem, not a child starvation problem in this country.
refusing to recognize that those problems are connected and that there's tons of evidence that literally millions of American children need free lunches and that it would be incredibly beneficial to those children and thus society as a whole to get them. In this clip, Kirk yells, "Get a job," and the crowd laughs because they still operate on the image of black welfare queens, not realizing that the average recipient of food stamps is a single white woman with 2 kids. Mind you, the woman originally used to demonize the concept of welfare and called the welfare queen was a white woman.
Her name was Linda Taylor, and she was identified by the Chicago Tribune in 1974 as a person who had committed welfare fraud while driving fancy cars, including a Cadillac. And very quickly after that, she was given the nickname the Welfare Queen.
It is accurate to say
By the
that
way, she was prosecuted as well. That's the thing that's funny is she committed welfare fraud, got caught, and went to prison. And it was a white woman, and it's like that people talk about it as if it's real.
Higher percentage of black children suffer from food insecurity in this country, something like 20 to 30% of black children, or around 2.3 million kids. And white children suffer from food insecurity at a much lower rate, somewhere around 7%, but we live in a predominantly white country. So that 7% adds up to close to 4 million white children whose parents need to get a job, so the rest of us don't have to pay a few extra dollars on our taxes to help their children not starve and not grow up being statistically more likely to end up dead or in jail. Ironically, paying for school lunches up front means paying less for jails, healthcare, and welfare later in their lives. But because of people like Charlie Kirk, many conservatives would rather those 4 million children starve if it means those who are undeserving suffer. Even now, as the government is preparing to shut down, conservatives are mocking people who won't be able to feed themselves.
And this is actually a good point. Thank you, FD Signifier, for making a great video. The purpose of That's why universal school lunches and breakfast, that will disproportionately help black people. You understand? But it also feeds those 5 million hungry white kids. So the universal programs help the poor white people and they help the poor black people. And because our society is racist, it has excluded black people from those universal programs in the past. By creating a truly universal society, you will be helping black people disproportionately, a share of the population, because of that historical exclusion. That is a form of reparations for the harms of the past. You're just selling it by making it universal.
Here's the real power of this cult, of the culture war. Some of these same people doing the mocking were themselves once on SNAP benefits. Some of these same poor white moms of those 4 million kids are still likely going to vote Republican in 2028. And I want to correct the common sentiment from progressives that says it's because they're dumb. They're not dumb, delusional maybe, but they just fully believe in the worldview they've been sold. And this begs the question, why and how? These decisions actively make America worse for everyone, not just black people or gay people or immigrants, everyone. And most of the people who suffer are white. And many of those suffering also support their own suffering. Why and how? To answer that is super complex, and I don't know all of it, but I know a big factor that brings us back to Charlie Kirk is his role in the culture wars and his job of recruitment and reinforcing of the moral standards of the right by using those culture wars to galvanize and build consensus with their base. And this is most prominent through the media. Today, that is YouTube and podcasts, but for a while, it was TV and radio. And that's where the foundation lies, in media manipulation. And to understand that, you have to start with good old Satan himself, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 666. This man is undefeated in how often something bad comes back to him. In this situation, it's the 1987 ending of a policy called the Fairness Doctrine. You may have heard right-wing pundits at times try to make this seem like this doctrine would silence them and make it so they wouldn't be able to have the right to be on air, but that's not really accurate. The end result probably would change the way that all politics are discussed in media. But what the Fairness Doctrine really was making media companies more responsible for the type of topics they covered on air. Essentially, you couldn't have something like Fox News before the 1980s, and the same could be said for MSNBC, because the Fairness Doctrine basically said that if you have opinions of a political or controversial nature, you have to have both sides of that opinion, and they have to be presented in an earnest and direct manner, unless you can legit get fined by the FCC. Thus, it was hard to use media to exclusively promote any political agenda. There was political discourse in media before then, but it was much more measured and straightforward, more educational, and far less entertaining. Hence the many TV broadcast interviews of political figures, even radical ones like a Malcolm X. With the fairness doctrine gone, our politics became another framework for just being entertainment, just as subject to media manipulation and sensationalism in the name of ratings and marketing versus education and seeking the truth. Today, our political media looks more like something from Monday Night Football or professional wrestling, and entire networks of channels can push explicit and clear political agendas. And now there are large groups of Americans who only get their news from overtly biased sources. And no, this video is not sponsored by Ground News, but it is sponsored by Nebula. We can talk about that real quick. If you're enjoying this video analyzing white culture and conservative...
Mike, why did the New Deal not get rid of the Depression? It did. It did. Actually, what happened is FDR listened to some fucking conservative economists and said, okay, guys, it looks like the Depression is going away. Let's have a balanced budget. And then they did a balanced budget, and then that caused a recession to happen. So it was the cutting of the New Deal that caused a second round. Nebula.
That you really want to see. And you won't be charged until the 4th day, and you'll get an email reminding you in case you want to. I dare you to give it a doubt that you have seen everything. You'll be supporting the growth, not just of my channel, but of creators like me to continue to go beyond the limitations of YouTube and modern media as a whole. Ground News shade notwithstanding, the point is that having a balanced intake on what political opinions you bring in pretty much started to die at that point. And then it got even worse because of one more thing. Reagan isn't the only villain here. You all know I'm bipartisan in my hatred of America's political apparatus. The next major factor is the Telecommunications Act signed by Bill Clinton in 1996.
Today, with the stroke of a pen, our laws will catch up with our future. We will help to create an open marketplace where competition and innovation can move as quick as light. An industry that is already 1/6 of our entire economy will thrive. It will create opportunity, many more high-wage jobs, and better lives for all Americans.
Among many other things, what this mainly did was allow for unchecked corporate ownership of media companies, resulting in massive mergers until only a few companies own all of what is seen or heard on our screens and airwaves. So now you have companies like the far-right leading Sinclair Media owning most local TV stations in the country and purposely seeding right-wing perspectives into their coverage and being blatantly manipulative in their efforts to control media narratives, as seen in this horrifying but real clip of their many news stations reading the same script.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things they simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So with these two things in place, we now have the environment set for people like a Charlie Kirk to wield immense power in pushing cultural narratives and swaying public and political influence. They just didn't quite know it yet. And Kirk comes in the late 2010s, but he's following in a tradition of right-wing talking heads, normalizing certain far-right talking points. And here's where we meet the most important character in the history of the culture wars, and possibly one of the most influential political figures to never hold an office, Rush Limbaugh.
Folks, there's actually a debate going on ESPN and throughout the sports world over who can use the N-word when.
I think one of the people that, instead of me like kind of rambling meaninglessly, I think one of the more interesting aspects of the New Deal is Eleanor Roosevelt. Doesn't get talked about much anymore. Basically, she was a massive feminist and racial justice advocate, you know, the wife of FDR, and promoted a number of efforts to change the Democratic Party, which is why in the elections from 32, I think it was something like 20% of black people voted for the Democratic Party, and in 36, I think it was something like 50-60% voted for FDR in 36, even though programs were just beginning. What's a good source for reading about the New Deal? Let me think about that. I need to put together a list of books I've read.
and how the white race has probably had fewer slaves and for a briefer period of time than any other in the history of the world. What are the similarities between the Democrat Party of today and the Nazi Party?
Rush Limbaugh is greatly responsible for today's political reality. There is no Trump, no Fox News, probably no Manosphere, and definitely not a modern culture war without him. He is patient zero for the awful timeline we're in right now. Ironically, Limbaugh was the failed son of a prominent political family whose only talent was yapping at a time where that talent only had one medium to be successful, which was radio. And Limbaugh loved radio and worked in it on and off growing up until he got to college. And then he dropped out of college to focus on being a DJ full time in his early 20s and was not very successful until he found his calling as a right-wing provocateur. And this wasn't a new thing for American radio at the time, but to give the devil his due, Limbaugh was extremely talented as an orator.
Barney admitting that he had an affair with Stephen Goby, and he said, I was just trying to help this guy through some problems, but I got suckered. That's what drove me to My Boy Lollipop. My Boy Lollipop. Perfect. It was absolutely perfect. I don't think that that is making fun of the homosexual lifestyle.
Because of the Fairness Doctrine and the Telecommunications Act, the value of his voice skyrocketed and spread throughout the nation. In his book, Talk Radio is America, How an Industry...
Excuse me? I think it's the opposite. I think it was the repealing of the Fairness Doctrine that skyrocketed Rush Limbaugh. I think it was the repealing of the Fairness Doctrine
took over the political
that allowed right-wing radio to develop.
That took over the United States. Brian Rosenwald explains how, with the Fairness Doctrine gone, radio stations learned to streamline their content for market optimization, making all-day conservative talk shows a strong branding strategy, partially due to the fact that newer FM radio was clearer.
Exactly, yeah.
And better for music, but couldn't reach as far as AM radio, and listeners were fine listening to lower quality signals for talk radio, meaning that it was rural Americans well outside of city centers that was their key market demographic, playing into certain conservative and regressive ideologies around people and social issues, etc. Was great for
Chad. I misheard.
Galvanizing that community. And this coincided with the aforementioned rise in media consolidation, as well as the vision of people like Newt Gingrich, who recognized where politics would fail, culture wars could prevail. And so what we have is our first ever basically algorithmic bubble, where a whole community of people are cocooned in a specific view of the world without ever being exposed to opposite opinions, and then enriched and radicalized and having everything about that reality turned up to 10 to the point where we are today. We're at a point now where Charlie Kirk is saying things that Limbaugh would have been taken off of air for in the 90s.
Taylor Swift might de-radicalize herself, engage in reality more, and get outside of the abstract clouds. Reject feminism. Submit to your husband, Taylor.
Again, the point is always to push the envelope on what can be deemed normal and civil, and that's what these people have been and are continuing to do. Republican politicians courted Limbaugh's favor. He makes visits to the White House, he advises presidents, and he gets more and more influential. Mind you, in this same time, both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton served 8-year terms. So he isn't all powerful in terms of actual sentiment for most Americans, which is something that's important to remember, but I'll come back to that later. But the nature of our politics is fundamentally altered in terms of polarization and what counts as a political platform. Instead of actually talking about policies on helping American people with jobs and healthcare and the economy and even safety, it just becomes, are trans people playing sports with your children? Are gay people kissing each other? Are black people existing? The most effective commercial.
The thing that I would say the most, and I think this is a good place to call it because I love FD Signifier videos, but it's getting late. And I would say politics, and I was literally, and it's funny because I recorded a TikTok. I ended up not posting it because I want to workshop the idea. But one of the things I noticed is people don't talk about ideas much anymore. Whenever I'm looking at the algorithms on TikTok, people are not talking about policies. They're talking about dumbass shit. They're talking about so-and-so said this, or North Korea bad. No, North Korea good. It is not like, hey, I support this idea. This is why this is a good idea. There might be something like rent control, guys. I want you to know rent control is a bad idea. There'll be like a smug white liberal walking going, Zoran Mamdani wants to do rent control. I Googled an abstract of a paper from something called the Cato Institute, and that tells you it's bad. I am the smug urbanist. Like, there is that. There isn't really conversations about what we need as a country to make the country not suck. And I feel like a lot of these narratives that he's talking about also exist on the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party doesn't want to have policy discussions either. I think this is where I think is the more important point, which is like the reason why Zoran Mamdani won is because he was able to have policy discussion. All the conversations were about his ideas, and the attacks of the culture war shit didn't hit because he had a locus, a core of really good ideas. And so instead of, and by the way, I'm fucking up by even trying to litigate the New Deal with people that don't know what the New Deal is. Like, if you think New Deal bad, fine. Like, why am I even wasting my time? Why am I wasting my time trying to litigate this with you? I should be trying to get you on board of a common set of ideas. Mike, please watch this before you go.
Executive Order Domestic Terrorist Organization.
All right, that's what President Trump did. What does the FBI say?
We share the same view. When you look at the data right now that we're facing, right now, what I see from my position is that's the most immediate violence that we're facing.
So where is the Antifa headquarters?
What we're doing right now with the organization.
Where in the United States does Antifa exist? If it's a terrorist organization and you've identified it as number one.
We are building out the infrastructure.
So what does that mean? We're trying to get the information. You say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Tell us as a committee, how did you come to that? Where do they exist? How many members do they have in the United States as of right now?
Well, that's very fluid. It's ongoing for us to understand that. The same, no different than Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you. I'll ask one question, sir. I just want you to tell us. If you said Antifa is the number one domestic terrorist organization operating in the United States, I just need to know where they are, how many people. I don't want a name. I don't want anything like that. How many people have you identified with the FBI that Antifa is made of?
Well, the investigations are active.
Sir, you wouldn't come to this committee and you can't prove. I know you wouldn't do that, but you did.
Well, chat, we better get ourselves together and all pulling in the same direction, because I don't know about you, but it seems pretty clear that the Donald Trump administration is trying to declare me illegal. That's what I see. Like, I see an administration that's trying to declare me illegal. All right, everybody, stay safe out there. Solidarity forever, my friends. I'm sending you over to Joshua, our favorite leftist psychology expert, friend of the show, great guy. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Thank you guys for all the support. See you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, Central Committee. Vibes. We're going to finish the FD signifier video tomorrow and many, many more. I'll see you soon.